Colleagues, today we mark the 10th anniversary of the murder of our former colleague and friend to so many in this place, Jo Cox. Jo was proud to be a Member of Parliament for Batley and Spen. She was dedicated to serving her constituents and was a relentless campaigner for equality, human rights and social justice. Jo's death, while carrying out her constituency duties, shocked members across the House. In my role, the Chair of the Parliamentary Security Committee at that time of her death, and since then as Speaker, I've made it my personal mission to improve the security and safety of members, their families and staff, because no member should fear carrying out their democratic duties. In remembering Jo today, I invite all the House to reflect on the words she shared during her maiden speech. We are far more united and far more in common than that which divides us. Our thoughts are with Jo's family and friends on this day. Thank you, colleagues. Order, order. We start with questions. Secretary of State for Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Affairs, Curry McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I would echo what you've just said about Jo Cox. I think her message is more important today than it ever was. Question number one.
Minister.
Mr Speaker, may I also echo your words about Jo Cox, our friend and colleague, who we remember in our hearts and who, had she not been so brutally murdered, would have been in this House, and I can almost say for sure been here in Foreign Office questions. Mr Speaker, rivers originating from the Tibetan Plateau are thought to directly sustain 1.8 billion people, providing drinking water, irrigation and power generation. Through the Himalayan Resilience Action Programme, the UK has supported research into climate and environment risks around the Tibetan Plateau and supported efforts to strengthen climate resilience in the region. The Resilience Action Plan has promoted science-based policy and dialogue across the Hindu Kush Himalaya.
For that response, China's actions from environmentally destructive mining to building dams to divert water sources will have consequences far beyond the Tibetan Plateau, as she says, as will the failure to address the impact of climate change on the third pole. What steps can the UK take to raise these issues at a global level? And does the Minister agree with me that the voices of Tibetans should be heard in any such talks?
Minister.
Mr Speaker, I thank my honourable friend, and the UK continues to engage with China on climate and environmental issues. During the recent UK-China Environment Dialogue, the Secretary of State secured agreement for greater collaboration with China on ecosystem resilience, biodiversity conservation and multilateral environmental processes. Our Himalayan Resilience Action Plan is building regional resilience through nature-based solutions, tackling water insecurity, air quality management and promoting dialogue through the International Centre for Integrated Mountain Development. And as countries come together in pursuit of these solutions, it is important that affected communities are consulted.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Tibetan Parliament in Exile, which the Tibet APPG visited a couple of weeks ago, and we engaged extensively with them, is terribly worried that the central Tibetan autonomous region is completely closed off by the CCP for any outside access. Very little comes out and almost nothing goes in. Is she not worried about the complete secrecy in which the Chinese authorities can potentially conduct environmental destruction that has a massive global impact?
Minister.
I thank the Honourable Lady, and she does raise an important concern. And what I would also say to her is that we are concerned by reporting from the UN Special Rapporteurs that large-scale environmental projects in Tibet risk the forced displacement also of Tibetans from their ancestral villages. This is important that we keep these issues on our radar.
Vicky Slade.
Question number 2, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Stand and look at the shield to Jo Cox above Parliament today to just add my personal tribute to Jo, a fellow West Yorkshire MP and a passionate and committed internationalist, as well as somebody who brought communities together here at home. We think of Jo's family and especially her sister Kim, keeping Jo's legacy alive. Yeah. The US are our deepest security and intelligence ally, our biggest trading partner, our top export market, and I saw against the strength of our people-to-people relationship when I joined His Majesty the King on the state visit to mark 250 years since the Declaration of Independence.
Vicky Slade.
Thank you, and I regret I never had the chance to meet Jo Cox, but you're absolutely right, her sister's doing her very proud. As well as being the year the current US President was born, 1946 was the year the UK-US special relationship was formally cemented in Winston Churchill's Sinews of Peace speech and credited by Russian historians as the start of the Cold War. That war ended in the 1980s, but the relationship between Western allies and Russia is distinctly chilly again, with threats appearing close to our shores even this weekend. Mr Speaker, I welcome the progress on the Iranian ceasefire, but over the 3 months the US and Israel have been at war with Iran, the conflict has made many people rich, and it's been reported that Russian revenue from oil and petroleum has increased by 39%. So given the actions of the US appear to be helping Russia rather than supporting Ukraine and NATO, does she share my concerns that this is causing further damage to the special relationship that's endured for 8
Well, I can say to the honourable member that, in fact, the Prime Minister is discussing at the G7 today the issues around the importance of support for Ukraine. The G7 had meetings with President Zelensky and the importance of maintaining the economic pressure on Russia. She is right to highlight the risks that Russia becomes a beneficiary from the conflict in Iran. It is crucial that we ensure that that is not the case and also maintain that pressure, which we are working with the US to do.
Response.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I echo your words and the words of the Secretary of State with regards Jo Cox? I'm sure everyone across the House is thinking about her today. Our special relationship with the United States is about more than just the President. It's about a deep connection with the American people. I think that's something we should always remember. I'm very proud of my Prime Minister's actions with regards to the conflict in Iran. However, would the Secretary of State agree with me that it's hugely important that we continue to have that special relationship with the United States, not just the relationship with the American people, but also American businesses like Raytheon in my constituency of Harlow?
I thought for a second we were not going to get to the mention of Harlow, but finally, in the final word, I welcome that question from my honourable friend. He's right. The UK took a different view from the US at the start of the Iran conflict, and I think we were right to do so. But we also continue to have really close security cooperation and also economic cooperation between our countries, having met many of the businesses most closely involved in that relationship as part of the King's visit, and I know his businesses in Harlow will continue to do so as well.
Dame Priti Patel, Shadow Foreign Secretary.
Mr Speaker, I echo your sombre words and remarks about Jo Cox, and her memory and her family are in our thoughts today. Mr Speaker, the UK's long-standing strategic security, defence and intelligence relationship with the United States is crucial for us and to our allies. With negotiations undertaken by the United States in the Middle East in relation to Iran, can the Foreign Secretary tell the House what role did Britain play in these negotiations, given our historic links to partners in the region? Has the government seen the US-Iran agreement? And what is Britain's role in shaping future foreign policy and the security architecture in the Middle East?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, the Shadow Foreign Secretary makes an immensely important point. I spoke to Secretary of State Rubio on Friday exactly about the final stages of these discussions that were taking place before the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, was agreed. And what is clear is that this is really just the start of many further phases of work and negotiations and discussions, including on nuclear, where we're clear Iran must not ever get a nuclear weapon, and we stand ready to support those detailed and technical talks, and also on the importance of reopening the Strait of Hormuz, where we've been in discussion not just with the US, but clearly with France, who we have been building the maritime mission with, but also with partners in the Gulf as well, so we can ensure that we get freedom of navigation restored as swiftly as possible.
Clive Betts.
Number 3, Mr Speaker.
Foreign Secretary.
With permission, Mr Speaker, I will answer questions 3, 5, 9 and 19 together. The settlements in the West Bank are a fundamental barrier to peace and a flagrant breach of international law. We condemn the rising and incredibly disturbing settler violence that we have seen over the past year. And last week, I announced a new wave of sanctions to target the networks that are supporting this violence, the fourth package of sanctions against extremist Israeli settlers under this government.
By Betts.
I could just add a few of my words about the murder of Joe Cox. I was a friend and colleague of Joe's. I still remember the numbness and shock that I felt on hearing the news. Yeah. Quite simply, no member of this House should fear for their lives because of being able to speak out on behalf of their constituents. Yeah. In terms of the West Bank is illegally occupied by Israel. The settlements are illegal. They've been expanded with extreme violence by settlers supported by the IDF. I don't know whether my right honourable friend is aware, but in May, the Dutch government decided to ban trade in goods from the settlement. They did so because they want to put pressure on the Israeli government. In doing so, and the Foreign Minister made this very clear, they acknowledged that enforcement will be difficult, and they carefully weighed these matters up, but decided in the end that doing anything was better than doing nothing. Could I suggest that might be an appropriate course of action for our government? We ought to be seen on the right side of this, and finding reasons why we can't act is not right. We ought to be acting on this matter.
Secretary.
Well, let me respond to my honourable friend's important point. We are clear that action is needed and we are acting, and that's why this government has done more, I think, in the last 2 years on this issue than any government for many decades, because we are so concerned about settlement expansion and settler violence. And it's why we have not only had the recent sanctions against settler violence, but also we have sanctioned 2 Israeli cabinet ministers for exactly that reason, because we take this issue so seriously. But I think we also agree on the principles here that settlements are legal, no one should be profiting from them, and we do not want businesses to be trading with them or operating within illegal settlements. A number of countries have explored legal bans, but have also had challenges with them, and we are looking at what they have done.
Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's clear that there have been over 760 incidents just this year, resulting in casualties or property damage, and 57 deaths. So it's clear that the action we're taking so far and diplomacy isn't moving the dial. Now, I appreciate we're only one voice in the international community, but we clearly need to be seen to do absolutely everything we can to make a difference on this issue. So what will it take before the government will take further action, going further on sanctions and on settlement trade?
Well, last week we did take further action and set out a new wave of sanctions. On Friday, I also went to Paris for a meeting with other foreign ministers, but also with civil society organisations and community organisations from across Israel and Palestine. Last week, with Australia and with Canada, we also launched the International Peace Fund in order to support that community-level building of the foundations of a two-state solution. And later this week, I will go to Egypt to have similar discussions, because in the end, we will only make progress through concerted international diplomacy, working in partnership, because no country can do this alone.
Luke Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I echo what honourable friends have said about Joe Cox? One Palestinian child is killed every week, or has been killed every week, in the West Bank since January 2025. Hundreds remain in detention, and many more face significant disruption to their education. Can I ask the Foreign Secretary what steps the government is taking with international partners to improve the safety of children in the West Bank and ensure that they can enjoy an education free from violence?
My honourable friend is right to raise the plight of children in the West Bank. I would also add to that the terrible plight of children still in Gaza, where there is still not sufficient humanitarian support, and that has gone backwards too. And he's also right to say some of this is about the impact of violence, and some of the targeted and ideologically driven violence against Palestinians on their own land is settler terrorism, and we should call it that. We are continuing to provide support for children in Palestine, including providing additional funding for the Palestinian Authority so they can pay the salaries of teachers and keep schools going.
Alex McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week I signed a letter along with 140 colleagues to the Foreign Secretary asking the government to take further action in response to settler violence and the rhetoric used by two far-right Israeli government ministers. Over the last 2 years, I've heard from hundreds of my constituents expressing their deep concern about the Israeli government's actions in the West Bank. Will the Secretary of State commit today to banning all trade with those illegal settlements? And if not, why not?
Foreign Secretary.
I thank the honourable member for his question, because what is happening with the expansion of Israeli settlements, also some of the violence that has circulated in them, is this has been a deliberate attempt from some to undermine any possibility of a two-state solution, from hardliners to pursue what is actually effectively, in many areas, annexation. Illegal annexation is their intention as well. So we agree on the principles that no one should be trading with illegal settlements, and that is different from long-standing legitimate trade with businesses across Israel, which we continue to support. It is the case a small number of countries have explored legal bans, but have had challenges with them. And the most effective impact we can have on all of these issues is to work internationally with other countries to provide new energy behind the two-state solution, as we had last year.
Simon Hoare.
Speaker, I welcome the Foreign Secretary's use of the term settler terrorism. She is absolutely right. The phrase settler violence doesn't do what is happening quite justice. She will also be aware that the settler terrorism is often enabled, encouraged, or at best a blind eye turned by both Israeli police and the IDF. She will know the damage that terrorist activity perpetrates. Can she, if Israel wishes to remain the villa in the jungle that they always wished to be, can she at least remind her Israeli government counterparts of the importance of the rule of law and the separation of the duties of the IDF and the police when it comes to protecting the citizens of both Israel and Palestine?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I can say to the honourable member that we do continually raise these issues with the Israeli government, because we cannot have, when we've seen things like the property damage, the intimidation, farmers' olive trees burned down, we've seen families' waters disconnected, we've seen mobs rampaging. It's why we have introduced the scale of the breadth of sanctions, including on organisations such as the Farmers Association, which have been supporting them, but it's why we also need to challenge any culture of impunity. There has to be accountability for what is effectively criminal acts.
Andrew George.
The Secretary of State has both said that she is looking at, in her response, at options, but also that she wishes to work in partnership on the international sphere as far as this is concerned. I mean, she must accept that the UK has significant history and responsibility in this region. And does she not listen to the words of her backbenchers that it is really incumbent on her to take action now, and not simply to look at things and to seek partnership, but to take action now to have real effect on this appalling continuing outrage?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I would just point out to him the action that we have already taken actually has a stronger impact than many of the other measures that he is talking about, and that includes sanctions on individual members of the Israeli cabinet, something that very many other governments have not done, and we encourage other governments to do what we have done. It also includes the work internationally to seek to find new energy behind the two-state solution. That includes the 20-point peace plan in Gaza, but has to include the West Bank as well. And it's why also tomorrow, when I travel to Egypt, I will be meeting with the new Palestinian National Committee to be operating in Gaza as well, because it is that concerted international effort that we need in order to have an impact.
Brendan O'Hara.
Mr. Speaker, last week Amnesty published a report entitled Erasing Anything Palestinian, and it shined a powerful light on Israel's ethnic cleansing in the West Bank. And it makes clear that what's happening is not driven by rogue settlers or a few extremist ministers, but rather it's state-sanctioned and it's state-financed. Yet to date, the UK's response has been largely performative and, unfortunately, fairly inconsequential. So does the government accept that this is indeed state-enabled ethnic cleansing? And if it does, shouldn't it be doing much, much more to prevent it and to punish the perpetrator?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, once again, I would point out to him really the strength of the action where we have brought together countries from across the world and also gone further than most countries across the world. But it is deeply disturbing that what is being driven here is both a level of violence and also a deliberate attempt with the E1 settlements in particular to undermine any possibility of a two-state solution. So that is a long-term thing, and it has been supported by many people across the Israeli government, and that is a deep challenge for everyone. And it is also why we need that international action. What happened in the autumn was we had an international consensus and energy that delivered the 20-point plan for Gaza that nobody expected would be achieved. We need to pull that energy together again. That's why I was in Paris on Friday. That's why I was discussing this with Australia and Canada, as well as European colleagues. And it's why I will go to Egypt, to the Middle East, where the energy on many of these things has come from, in order to try and make progress on that again.
Dr. Chance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to start by joining you and colleagues across the House in paying tribute to the memory of Jo Cox, and her words about seeking what we have in common and working to counter the politics of division, I think, are ever more relevant for all of us today. In relation to West Bank settlement activity, the Secretary of State set out piecemeal and entirely inadequate measures last week to address this. It was raised to her at that point that the UK would be hosting a great Israeli real estate event at the weekend. She undertook to look into it. That event took place. At that event, properties in illegal settlements were being marketed on British territory. The government has been sent the evidence about this. How is it that this government fails even to prevent the marketing of illegal property in this country and still fails to take action? The Secretary of State continues to tell us about the meetings that she's had, but what we want is leadership. The UK has a particular responsibility. Will she step up and ban trade with illegal settlements?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we have been very clear that not only should no businesses be engaging in trade or in marketing around the illegal settlements, they certainly should not be doing so on UK soil. And that is why my colleague, the Minister for the Middle East, North Africa, and also the DCMS, have raised this now directly with the Advertising Standards Agency, because we take this so seriously. We have asked them now to urgently look into this and to reassure us that if there is any evidence of the advertising or promotion of property in illegal settlements at this or any other events, they will uphold the law, regulations and guidance that apply. It is extremely important that those standards are met in the UK, and that is exactly why we have raised this so seriously with the Advertising Standards Agency.
Callum Miller, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and may I associate my party with your tribute to the life and work of Jo Cox and extend our thoughts to her family and to her many friends. Mr. Speaker, the prospect of a two-state solution rests on at least two essential conditions: the protection of Palestine's territorial integrity and political reform within the Palestinian state. This weekend, we saw the selling in London of properties in illegal settlements. Instead, their expansion must be reversed by cutting off their finance at source. So will the Foreign Secretary commit to withdrawing the licence to operate for any UK financial institutions facilitating credit or services for illegal settler activity? And given that President Abbas has now announced legislative and presidential elections will be held in early 2027, what measures is the government taking to ensure that those elections will be free and fair?
I welcome the points that the honourable member has made. So what I can tell him is on the sanctions front, we continue to look at what further sanctions could be needed in order to address illegal settlements and also activity linked to those illegal settlements and settler violence. We are also looking at whether and where it may be needed to strengthen our overall sanctions regime, as well as looking at individual sanctions issues. And then on the issues around the Palestinian Authority reform, we do support the reform measures, including the free and fair elections, which is crucial. But we're also providing some direct funding to the Palestinian Authority, including to pay salaries, but also through Michael Barber to be able to provide expertise to support the modernisation of the Palestinian Authority, because that is a fundamental part of having a Palestinian state, both in the West Bank and in Gaza and in East Jerusalem. It's crucial. Palestine must be run by Palestinians.
Gregory Stafford.
Question number 4, sir.
Minister.
Mr Speaker, you'll know that long before we came into this place, Joe was a good friend of mine and indeed colleague at Oxfam, and so I have to say that coming in today is particularly sad on this anniversary, but I also know that Joe would have told me to stop getting too emotional and to get on with the job in her inimitable way, as she often did. And, Mr Speaker, therefore, I will answer questions number 4 and 18 together with your permission. We are committed to increasing the economic pressure on Russia by disrupting the revenue the Kremlin generates from Russia's energy trade, including oil, which remains its primary means of financing the illegal war in Ukraine. And today, the Prime Minister has announced further sanctions, designating and specifying 70 individuals, entities and ships under the UK's sanctions regulations, including 20 shadow fleet vessels.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And while diplomatic pressure on China, India and Turkey is essential, we must also do more militarily to disrupt the shadow fleet carrying Putin's oil. I pay tribute to our armed forces who this weekend boarded a Russian-linked tanker in UK waters under new government powers. But since those powers were announced in March, 184 sanctioned shadow fleet vessels have made 238 journeys through UK waters, including 94 journeys into territorial waters, without a single interdiction until now. So can I ask the Minister, what is his department doing with the Ministry of Defence and with international partners to make sure this is a sustained approach rather than a one-off?
Minister? Well, Mr Speaker, he'll understand that I'm not going to comment on future operational matters. What I can say, of course, is that we'd also assisted in the interdictions of other vessels, including working with the French and indeed with the United States in relation to the Bella 1. What I will say is that we keep Russia's activities under very, very close review. We designate hundreds of vessels under the Shadow Fleet measures, and we will look at all opportunities to ensure that they cannot evade sanctions.
Dr Danny Chambers.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. About 2 years ago, visited Ukraine taking medical supplies in refurbished ambulances, and we only had to stop twice to fill up with diesel, which made us realise just how close the front line really is to us. It's deeply troubling that the government are now reneging on their full support of Ukraine by pursuing an indefinite waiver on imports of Russian oil via third countries. So can I ask the Foreign Secretary to reverse course on this and close any loopholes putting any money into Putin's war machine?
Yes.
Well, Mr Speaker, with respect, the Honourable Gentleman may have not caught up with developments on that front. Firstly, this was never an indefinite waiver. We said we were keeping it under a 2-weekly review. My honourable friend from DBT made that very, very clear. And yesterday in the debate in this House, and indeed the announcements over the weekend, we set clear end dates for those temporary licences, which were to phase in these measures. Of course, these are new measures. We were never watering down previous sanctions. These are toughening the sanctions on Russia, but with sensible provisions in place to phase them in.
Snell.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. The Minister will be aware, Mr Speaker, that the sanctioned oil and indeed gas that is sold by Russia to Turkey and China is often used in companies in those countries to manufacture products, including ceramics, that are then dumped into the UK, distorting our domestic manufacturing base, which is a secondary impact of the profits that are coming from that sanctioned material. So can I ask what evidence the Department shares with the Department of Business and Trade so that they can put in place the trade remedies necessary to protect our domestic manufacturing from the impacts of this illegal trading?
Well, he raises an important issue, and I'd certainly be happy to discuss this further with him. Indeed, I'm sure colleagues from the Department of Business and Trade would be happy to as well.
Shadow Minister, Mr. Andrew Stone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We pay tribute to the courage and bravery of our armed forces in boarding and seizing the Russian Shadow Fleet vessel at the weekend. And we also want to place on record that we welcome the further sanctions announced today, including those targeting that Shadow Fleet. We also urge the government to put pressure on those who buy and refine Russian oil, as the freedom of Ukraine depends on cutting off the funds that finance Putin's illegal war. Given the urgency on the battlefields of Ukraine and the inflated revenue Putin has recently had from Russian oil, does the Minister think that the situation can wait until 2027 to bring in the ban on Russian-originated diesel and jet fuel imports?
Minister. Well, he asked an important question. As he knows, when I spoke with him yesterday in the committee debate, I made clear that, of course, that's the end date. Of course, we're keeping it under review every 2 weeks and, of course, could end it before then with the appropriate notices in place for industry. But what I will be clear, Mr. Speaker, is our sanctions are having a categorical impact on the Russian economy. They've slashed their economic growth forecasts. We've denied them access collectively with our sanctions to $450 billion worth that could have fueled the war for many, many more years. So our sanctions are having impact, and we will continue to toughen them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I think we both agree that this is important, as whilst Putin uses inflated oil prices globally to fund his war machine, our own defence investment plan is in tatters. The now former Defence Secretary's shocking resignation letter, in which he said the Prime Minister was unable and the Chancellor unwilling to provide the funding for the Defence Investment Plan, is absolutely damning. And the very next day, the government astonishingly announced £4.5 billion to paint 10,000 new zebra crossings. And given that the FCDO made a big cut to its own budget to fund defence last year, does the Minister share my anger that other departments are refusing to contribute to keep our country safe?
Just got to be careful we're not going very wide of the original question. And I think that is well wide. Rachel Hopkins.
Mr. Speaker.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Foreign Secretary said in her Locarno speech in December, and as the Chief of SIS reinforced a week later, an industrial-scale attack is being waged every day through social media designed to undermine our democracies and divide our societies. And we know that networks attributed to Russia, including Doppelganger, are flooding social media in countries across the world, not just here, Mr. Speaker, with counterfeit documents, deepfake material, in an attempt to weaken global support for Ukraine. So we are taking tough action on this front with our international partners.
Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every single day there's a tidal wave of disinformation being targeted at social media users in our country and around the world. And if we are in any doubt who is behind that wave of lies and fake images, we only need to see how much of it is designed to undermine the Ukrainian war effort or attack President Zelensky. So would the Minister agree with me that in order to protect the people of Ukraine, we need to take the fight to the sources of this information warfare?
Well, I completely agree with her, and that's exactly why, Mr. Speaker, we're taking the action that we have. We have, since October 2024, exposed and sanctioned 96 actors and entities involved in this type of activity, and we've imposed another 56 individuals and entities in May, particularly involved in activity to undermine Ukraine. This included employees of the Social Design Agency and ANO Dialogue. We are constantly looking at these measures and taking action. This is information warfare. The Kremlin is spending billions of dollars on this activity, and we will expose it and take it down.
So, Jeremy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In 2017, there was appalling ethnic cleansing in Myanmar in which Facebook was used to recruit civilian death squads. Atrocities continue to this day. The UK holds the pen on Myanmar at the UN. Will the Foreign Secretary at UNGA this year hold a high-level meeting to look at this issue and shine a spotlight on the human rights abuses that continue to this day in Myanmar?
Minister.
Well, I'm sure that my ministerial colleagues with responsibility for the relations in relation to Myanmar would like to follow up with him on that issue. But what I will say is that, of course, the challenge of misinformation, disinformation is not just related to Russia. It's in relation to a whole series of contexts. And, of course, not just states, Mr. Speaker. It's also non-state actors, including Daesh and other organisations. So we're working very closely with partners to identify and tackle these networks.
Dame Emily Thornbury, Chair of the Select Committee.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. The political murder of Jo Cox was deeply affecting for many of us, and frankly, none of us should ever recover from it. She was not only brave and principled, she was also funny. And if I ever need to cheer myself up, I simply remember her throwing her little body into the tug of war, the interparliamentary tug of war, and how very funny it was. And she knew it. Given that my committee and Philip Rycroft review have found that the UK is already experiencing Russian disinformation warfare and that our defences to it are worryingly weak, we have both recommended a statutory public-facing national counter-disinformation centre to ensure a coordinated response. The French have done it, the Swedes have done it, the Ukrainians have done it. I wonder if the Minister can hold out hope that Britain someday soon might do it too.
Minister.
Well, Jo certainly was funny. I remember standing in King Charles Street with her once. She got back from a hiking expedition with lots of climbing ropes in her bag just before coming in to speak to officials in the Foreign Office. So many fun moments with her over the years. But she raises an absolutely crucial point, and I really welcome the work, Mr. Speaker, that she and her committee have done on this issue. We've taken on board their recommendations very seriously. I'll continue that conversation with her. I can't make the promise she's asking for at the moment, but it's certainly something that we're looking very closely at.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Foreign Affairs Committee published at the end of March a report into disinformation diplomacy. We investigated how malign actors are seeking to undermine democracy in the UK from overseas using information manipulation and interference, using such techniques as spoofing, bots, and coordinated inauthentic behaviour. The Foreign Affairs Committee recommended that the government demand greater transparency from social media companies in relation to the algorithms that are exploited by malign actors overseas. What discussions are being had with other government departments to make this so?
Minister.
Well, I can assure him that we are very much having discussions with counterparts across government. I'll be meeting, I'm sure, in the next few days with the new Security Minister and the new Minister for the Armed Forces. But I've also been meeting recently with Minister at the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology to discuss these very issues. And I can assure him that we are working very closely together across government on this.
Dr. Becky Cooper.
Question number 8, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I will answer questions 8 and 15 together. The UK has allocated £26.9 million of UK aid funding to support the response to the current Ebola outbreak within the DRC. This funding will strengthen disease surveillance, rapid response and improve infection prevention and control. We're also working with the WHO and the Africa Centre for Disease Control to help scale up the response and adapt existing programmes. This is a deeply concerning situation and we will continue to work intensively alongside international partners over the coming weeks to monitor developments and take the necessary action to protect both regional and global health security.
Dr. Becky Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This Ebola outbreak now spans 29 health zones across 3 eastern provinces and is a reminder to us all that infectious diseases do not respect borders. With global health funding under significant pressure, does the Minister share my concern that we risk undermining the early warning systems that ultimately protect people here at home? And can he set out what steps the UK is taking to maintain its leadership role in global security?
Start.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank my honourable friend for a question? I'm glad to say the UK is not stepping back, and our response to this outbreak confirms that. We currently sit on the boards of the WHO, the Global Fund, Gavi and the Pandemic Fund. Our investment helps maintain critical global health security infrastructure, as well as tackling other health security threats, such as the antimicrobial resistance. Our leadership is amplified by world-class research and development and is a trailblazer in the life sciences sector.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The COVID-19 pandemic showed us how quickly infectious diseases can spread globally and the importance of acting early to contain outbreaks at source. Given that lesson, Mr. Speaker, can the Minister outline how the UK is working with international partners to strengthen pandemic preparedness through this response, including improving surveillance, early warning systems and rapid response capacity in countries like the Democratic Republic of the Congo, so outbreaks such as Ebola are contained before they pose a wider global health risk?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank him for his question? Our immediate priority, as he says, is supporting the DRC and the Africa-led response to the Ebola outbreak. The UK and international support will also strengthen health systems so countries can better respond to future outbreaks. This includes backing government-owned surveillance systems through the World Bank and major global health organisations. It also means providing UK expertise through mechanisms such as the UK HSA's Public Health Rapid Support Team.
Sir Andrew Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your wonderful words about Jo Cox and for the brilliant debate last Thursday as the main business of the House. Mr. Speaker, following the noble lady, the Development Minister's acknowledgement that Labour's horrific development and aid cuts undermine the response to the Ebola crisis and that funding is only 5% of the help for the last Ebola emergency a decade ago, will the government make clear that these pandemics cross borders and are a serious danger to all of us unless they are contained? Is that not, Mr. Speaker, the essence of the case for international development?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. I can confirm that the UK is leading the global response on Ebola and one of the first countries to respond with funding. I can also confirm that the Foreign Secretary is leading the charge on international funding for tackling the Ebola outbreak. And he's right to raise the concerns over international health security, and that's why the UK government is continuing to lead from the front in tackling the Ebola outbreak.
Ben Matthew.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning we held an informal IDC meeting with Professor Wim de Villiers and Richard Gordon of the University of Stellenbosch on the Ebola outbreak in the DRC. The University of Stellenbosch, its disease identification unit, has been involved on working on strategies to combat this outbreak, and the team commended the CDO and its involvement so far from Pretoria, citing the £100,000 funding committed locally. They made the point that in a situation like this, being fleet of foot is vital, and to do this, much can be done locally in Africa to develop diagnostics and monitoring of the disease, and in the medium term, vaccines. Can the Minister confirm that all is being done to further support these local responses and initiatives?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank him for his question? He's absolutely right to say there should be an Africa-led response. And it's extremely important that we listen to what African countries are telling us in terms of how we respond to the Ebola outbreak. In terms of investment on things around vaccinations, the Department of Health and the FCDO have invested £160 million in the CPIA to ensure that we are at the forefront of helping develop vaccines. If he'd like to write to me further, he's very welcome to.
There we are. Ian Lavery.
Number 10, sir.
Foreign Secretary.
Thank you. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz has hit the global economy and prices at the pump here at home. No country should be able to hijack the global economy in this way. That is why we welcome the announcement of the Memorandum of Understanding between the US and Iran, and why the UK has been leading diplomatic work across the world to maintain the consensus behind that crucial principle of freedom of navigation and international maritime law without tolls, without restrictions or threat of attack in the Strait of Hormuz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. They say the devil's in the detail. And while we await the full details of the US-Iran agreement, does the Secretary of State agree that had we followed the calls from those opposite to rush into war, it would only have prolonged the conflict and caused more financial misery to our constituents? And despite the noise, despite the bluster, is it not the case that the only boats the members opposite, through the cheerleading of the US aggression, have stopped are those left anchored between Iran and the Gulf states with oil bound for Britain?
And I thank my honourable friend for his question. We did take a very different view on the start of this conflict to the US and Israel, and we were right to do so, and a very different view as well to the party opposite. But we also believe in working internationally to bring this securely to an end, to support the further negotiations now needed, and also, alongside France, to lead efforts to establish a defensive multilateral maritime mission to reassure ensure international shipping and support the mine clearance to support the reopening of the strait as we move forward.
Dr. Andrew Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Iran has demonstrated that it can close the strait at will, and it probably will threaten to do so in the future when it wants something. So what can we do with international partners, particularly in the region, to engineer alternative routes that will allow oil and gas and fertiliser to exit the Gulf overland, thus neutralising the strait?
The Honourable Member makes a really important point, because I think economic security is something that all countries need to take much more seriously. The UK needs to take more seriously. Gulf countries are certainly taking much more seriously and looking at ways to develop new infrastructure to provide different kinds of supply lines, different opportunities as well. And we are keen to work with them. We have been involved in discussions with them on that. But we also need to ensure that the Strait of Hormuz opens. It is in line with international maritime law to open the strait fully, no restrictions, no tolls, and keeping it open for all.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Callum Milne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The terms of the US-Iran deal that have been briefed to the press look like a huge win for Iran. Above all, Iran has strengthened her position by showing the impact of closing the Strait of Hormuz. This spectacular failure of Trump's foreign policy has made us poorer and less secure. So may I ask the Foreign Secretary, what plans does the UK have to work with reliable allies to now contain Iran's malign influence? And will ministers back the Liberal Democrat amendment to the National Security Bill, which would ensure the IRGC is prescribed without delay?
Well, the Honourable Member will know we are taking action to strengthen the legislation around state-backed threats in the UK, and he will know that this is something that I have strongly been involved in and also strongly championed as well. In terms of the international issue, we have to ensure that any attempt to restrict or to put tolls on the Strait of Hormuz can never be agreed to. It has to be a fundamental principle that international shipping should be able to move through an international waterway. It's what we do in the Straits of Dover. It's what needs to happen in the Strait of Hormuz.
Anna Dixon.
Question 11, Mr. Speaker.
Who wants it? Foreign Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, can I say that I have made the violence against women and girls a priority for the Foreign Office, and last month I had the privilege of launching the International Coalition to End Violence Against Women and Girls, working with Spain, Australia, South Africa, Brazil, Jamaica, Morocco and Bosnia-Herzegovina, because we know that countries can work together and learn from each other on this crucial issue that affects women worldwide.
Thank you. I was moved to hear about Jo Cox's life and the impact she had on women globally through her work in last week's debate. She was a strong advocate for women's rights and for overseas development aid. Can the Secretary of State assure me that recent cuts to aid will not adversely impact projects like those I saw in Zimbabwe last year, which are helping to reduce the incidence of violence against women and girls?
Foreign Secretary.
I welcome my honourable friend's point, because Jo was a tireless champion for women's equality and opportunity here in the UK, but she also carried that with her all around the world to stand up for women's opportunities and to tackle issues internationally as well. My honourable friend makes an important point. We have been clear that as part of the changes to overseas development, we will maintain the priority and strengthen the priority for women and girls, so that by 2030 at least 90% of UK bilateral aid will ensure that it supports issues for women and girls.
Caroline Velden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A UN report from March last year lays bare the evidence of Israel's systematic use of rape and sexual violence in the occupied Palestinian territory. Israeli settlers are committing sexual violence in sight of Israeli forces, according to a recent report by the West Bank Protection Consortium. Given this government's commitment to the safety of women and girls, will the Secretary of State commit to publishing a response to both of these reports?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I can tell the honourable member that we are taking immensely seriously issues around the abuse and violence against women and girls in situations of conflict. That also includes looking at issues that have been raised with us, including in the West Bank. It also includes issues that have been raised with us in other parts of the world as well. The UK was responsible for the Women, Peace and Security UN resolution 25 years ago, and we are putting new energy behind that and raising that in every area of conflict.
Foreign Secretary Dame Priti Patel.
Can the Foreign Secretary tell the House what steps are being undertaken to investigate Daesh fighters who returned to Britain to prosecute them for their crimes, including sexual violence and rape against the Yazidis and others? And given the importance of ensuring there is accountability, reform of institutions to root out exploitation and risk from the UN, charities and even the FCDO, can she tell the House what the government's response is to the suspension of Karim Khan, the ICC, for allegations of sexual misconduct?
Foreign Secretary.
The Shadow Foreign Secretary will understand I can't comment in detail on individual case, but we do take issues around allegations extremely seriously in any institution. She will understand that. And I can also tell her that we expect to see accountability for crimes of sexual violence, and whether it be around individuals who come to the UK or whether it be around issues across the world, we are also supporting the evidence gathering, including expert evidence gathering, including in areas of conflict, so that there cannot be impunity for crimes against women and girls.
Whittles, John Whitby.
Number one, Mr. Speaker, please.
Foreign Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I want to formally welcome the fact of an agreement being announced between the United States and Iran. We should be clear, this is an important diplomatic breakthrough, but it is still just the beginning of further discussions and negotiations that will be important to de-escalate tensions, restore regional stability and reopen the Strait of Hormuz. I want to commend the government of Pakistan alongside Qatar and others who supported the mediation. And now there must be full implementation and further work, including the restoration of toll-free freedom of navigation through the Strait, where the UK stands ready to provide support, and also we all stand ready to contribute to vital technical work to ensure that Iran must never have a nuclear weapon and there can be containment that restores regional security. It's also vital that alongside this, the support for that all sides support ceasefire and peace in the Lebanon. We will work tirelessly alongside regional and international partners, including through the G7, the United Nations and our European partners, with sustained UK diplomacy to restore regional security and also support for the global economy.
John Whip.
Mr. Speaker, at COP29 an agreement was reached to provide $300 billion of international climate finance annually to developing countries by 2035 to help countries pursue green growth pathways, access clean energy, reduce deforestation, etc. What steps is her department taking to ensure this commitment is delivered in full by our international partners, and will the government press for that finance to be provided predominantly as grants rather than loans to avoid increasing debt burdens on developing countries?
My honourable friend is right to raise the importance of this issue. Tackling climate change across the world can also help in those countries, but also helps us here at home as well. That's why we are supporting climate finance internationally, because we can multiply the impact we have by working through international climate finance and funds. And as well as the billions of pounds of investment that the UK will be providing, we are also mobilising billions more in finance from the private sector as well, and will continue to engage internationally with all countries so they do their bit.
Can I just remind everybody we are on topicals, please. Dame Priti Patel, Shadow Foreign Secretary.
Speaker, China's human rights record is appalling. So Did the Foreign Secretary know that while she was enjoying the hospitality of the Chinese Communist Party earlier this month, that Chinese slave labour is being used to supply solar panels across UK schools and hospitals to meet Labour's net zero targets? How has the Foreign Secretary allowed this to happen? And does she think it's acceptable for her government to be turning a blind eye to Chinese slave labour and these awful human rights abuses?
Secretary.
Well, I can be clear, this government maintains high standards around our supply chains and is also strengthening action against abuse within supply chains. Whilst in China earlier this month, I have raised issues around human rights and issues around security as well. They are our third biggest trading partner and also a permanent member of the Security Council. That's why we also discuss with them global security. And I think she should agree that it would be wrong to simply refuse to talk to China.
Dame Pritchard.
Mr. Speaker, the Foreign Secretary will know that a secret camera was found in an office block where the plans for the Chinese Super Spy Hub embassy were approved. No one knows yet where the camera came from, but it does raise serious questions for the government about their approval of this Chinese spy embassy. Can the Foreign Secretary say, is this act of foreign espionage going to be investigated? And doesn't this incident once again highlight why China must be placed on the enhanced tier of furs?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, the Shadow Foreign Secretary and I are both former Home Secretaries who both take any security threat immensely seriously. It's why we are also even strengthening the legislation on state-backed threats, exactly because we take security issues so seriously. She will know the UK also has plans for new embassy facilities in Beijing because it is important that we have international standard and secure facilities in order to be able to engage, on security, and that is why we have to talk to the biggest countries in the world.
Daniel Francis.
Mr. Speaker, I've been contacted by members of the Tamil community across Bexley and Crayford who continue to press for accountability and justice in relation to atrocities committed during the civil war in Sri Lanka. They are very concerned regarding how the country's Prevention of Terrorism Act is currently being used to silence voices, including that of hip-hop Sangi. So, can my honourable friend outline the measures that her department has taken to press for accountability for both the historic and current persecution of Tamils within Sri Lanka?
Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for the question. We recognise the strength of feeling among diaspora communities and continue to press the Sri Lankan government bilaterally and at the United Nations Human Rights Council for meaningful progress to improve the human rights situation. This includes securing truth, justice and accountability for past abuses affecting all communities, including Tamils. And we have consistently raised concerns about the Prevention of Terrorism Act and its ongoing use, and will continue to urge its repeal and replacement in line with international law.
Prime Minister Netanyahu ordered the Israeli military to seize control of 70% of the Gaza Strip in breach of the ceasefire agreement. 90% of the homes have now been destroyed and estimates of $53 billion required to rebuild the Strip. Meanwhile, settlement expansion in the West Bank has increased by 80%, with Israeli settlers now comprising 1 in 6 of the population. What is the Foreign and Commonwealth Department doing with European allies to help the Palestinian people?
Foreign Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I met with European partners and others in Paris on Friday exactly to discuss the importance of providing new energy behind not just the two-state solution, but specifically the Gaza 20-point plan. It's why we set out the International Peace Fund, but we need that new commitment because there's a real serious risk that that 20-point plan is going backwards and risk going into the ground. We need that international commitment.
Luke Charters.
Mr. Speaker, with Anthropic being ordered to suspend access to Fable 5 and Mythos 5 for foreign nationals outside of the US, will the FCDO pursue reliable UK access to frontier AI models as a diplomatic goal?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Anthropic's Fable 5 and Mythos 5 models have been withdrawn worldwide, including in the US, and we respect this as a decision for the US government and are in direct contact with US government officials as this develops. It reinforces the importance of Britain having greater sovereign control over critical technology and maintaining our national capabilities that are important for us and our allies. The AI Security Institute is one of the best resource teams of its kind anywhere in the world. Protecting our national security is central to this government's approach to AI.
Jones.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Last month, 2 people were convicted of spying on Hong Kong dissidents in the UK on behalf of the Hong Kong government. Alarmingly, one was a UK immigration officer. What is the Minister doing to better protect Hong Kongers in the UK and in Wokingham who are concerned about growing Chinese influence threatening their freedom and safety?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are very clear that the UK will not tolerate any attempts by foreign states to intimidate, harass or harm individuals or communities in the United Kingdom. That continues to be our position.
Jessica Morgan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. On top of its efforts to interfere in Armenian democracy, Russia is now using economic pressure through arbitrary trade restrictions in an effort to undermine Armenia's strengthening ties with the UK and Europe. What more can we do on a practical level through our strategic partnership and alongside EU allies to support Armenia as it continues to pursue European integration?
Well, may I congratulate her on her damehood and also well-deserved, Mr. Speaker, and also for her consistent advocacy in relation to Armenia. I can absolutely assure her we're monitoring that concerning situation regarding Russian economic pressure on Armenia. We're developing our strategic partnership further. I was in fact discussing Armenia with both US and EU counterparts in recent days, and we'll work closely with international partners to ensure Armenia is robust and able to pursue its own future.
Wendy Chamberlain.
Mr. Speaker, I understand the FCDO sent representatives to Afghanistan to meet with women's organisations a few weeks ago. Can I seek assurances about the safety of those women's organisations going forward and ask for a written statement on the outcomes and context of that meeting?
I thank her for her question, Mr. Speaker. We do call on the Taliban to respect the rights of women and girls, including the right to education, and condemn any ongoing restrictions. I will raise with the Middle East Minister, who is travelling, her question and ensure that she gets a full written answer.
Sir Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Recently, I came back with the Business and Trade Select Committee from Canada, and we were very impressed by the opportunities presented by middle powers. And last week, the Midlands had its first Defence Procurement Conference. So could I ask the ministerial team what opportunities they're trying to develop in region so that we can work with our allies to make sure that we're making the most of the business opportunities for exports?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are building long-term partnerships between UK regions and our global network to support local growth, including in the West Midlands, and with more ministerial and heads of mission visits across the UK this year. Our diplomatic advisory hub delivered with the British Chamber of Commerce is also supporting businesses to build political insight and to grow internationally, and working with DBT to make sure that businesses seize opportunities from our trade agreements. Supporting growth at home is a priority for the whole of this government.
Caroline Belden. Not here. Afzal Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The International Court of Justice directed third states to not enter into trade dealings with Israel in the occupied Palestinian territories 2 years ago. The government still has not responded to this. Why? Will the Secretary of State recognise the UK's obligations to the ICJ and comply?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the UK reiterates the call in the ICJ's advisory opinion that Israel should end its occupation of Palestine as rapidly as possible and in line with our goal of a two-state solution. There is a great deal in the advisory opinion with which we agree, that settlements are illegal and that we should distinguish in everything we do between Israel within its 1967 borders and the Palestinian territory occupied since 1967.
Bacon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I refer the House to my register of interests. Given that the government has previously stated that Hamas must voluntarily disarm in accordance with the 20-point peace plan, and given this is clearly not happening, what is the government's practical strategy to ensure that Hamas is compelled to give up its weapons, cannot rebuild its military capabilities, and does not divert humanitarian aid?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Hamas is a terrorist organisation, and we have been clear that Hamas must decommission its weaponry and must no longer be allowed to pose a threat to Israel's security. The UK is committed to supporting the implementation of the 20-point Gaza peace plan in full, and as part of that transition process set out in phase 2 of the peace plan, we will continue to support those international efforts on a credible plan to achieve those goals.
Dame Annalise Dodds.
Thank you, Mr. I recently visited Chad with the APPG for Sudan and South Sudan, and in that connection we'll be registering an interest shortly. Like the Foreign Secretary, I was moved by Chad's willingness to accept 1.3 million refugees, but disturbed by the horrific scale of this crisis. So can I ask whether the Prime Minister is raising the Sudan crisis at the G7, because it must be raised at every international gathering? And is the UK advocating for countries like Chad to be included in international talks? Thank you.
Foreign Secretary.
Can I welcome my honourable friend, my Rotherham friend, visiting Chad and raising this issue? I can assure her I have already raised this as part of the G7. We had a significant discussion of the G7 foreign ministers. We'll continue to raise this at every level and continue to pursue the possibility of comments around what is happening in Sudan at every level, and G7 communiques as well.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, the security forces, the Pakistani security forces, have fired on peaceful demonstrators standing for human rights and for the rights to food and proper security in their area. More than 30 people were killed and more than 200 injured, including British nationals. So what action has the Secretary of State taken to actually call in the Pakistani High Commissioner and say not only this is unacceptable, what action is being taken to protect innocent bystanders?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are concerned about developments in Pakistan-administered Kashmir, and including, as he has outlined, the loss of life and of both security personnel and civilians. We recognise this is an internal matter for the authorities. However, he will know that we have changed our travel advice on the 6th of June to advise against all but essential travel to the AJK region of Pakistan-administered Kashmir due to the ongoing situation. He will also know we continue to closely monitor the situation, including the impact on British nationals, engaging with the government of Pakistan as appropriate.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Next January, the United Kingdom will take the chair of the G20, providing our country a real platform to lead the international conversation and to deliver here at home. Can the Minister tell the House at this stage what our priorities will be when we take the chair and what plans we have across government to make the most of this unique position?
Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank my honourable friend for his question? He's right to raise the importance of the G20 summit, not only this year, but when the UK is hosting from January. I can confirm that tackling structural imbalances, future industries, open trade, reforming global economic systems and supporting developing countries will be our focus as we move into chairing the G20. But he's right, this is a crucial moment for the United Kingdom and an important part for the FCDO, and we will be coordinating this work across government via the Cabinet Office.
Would the Secretary of State join with me in recommending that people visit the exhibition that colleagues and myself did this morning here in London, the 0629 AM exhibition, which shows examples of what happened on October the 7th, in order that we all may get a more rounded position on information about why there is such a scale of horrendous murder in Israel and the Middle East more generally?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we continue to condemn the most horrendous attacks on October 7th. It was an act of the most barbaric terrorism by Hamas, with deep scars for obviously families who lost loved ones, but the huge trauma that was instigated as a result, and was the worst attack on the Jewish people since the Holocaust. We remember with sadness all those who lost their lives.
Lord Hatton.
Mr. Speaker, every year billions of pounds never make their way to the Treasury coffers because of British tax havens such as the BVI. The upcoming Illicit Finance Summit offers us a real opportunity to tackle tax evasion and dirty money in these havens. Ahead of the summit, does the Minister agree that we must ensure that these havens finally throw open the book and that tackling tax dodging must be top of the agenda?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Illicit Finance Summit will convene a broad coalition to tackle dirty money globally and focus on financial transparency, property, crypto and illicit gold. The Crown Dependencies and Overseas Territories with financial centres have committed to upholding international tax standards, but we work very closely with them on upholding those international standards and indeed on wider transparency, including in relation to beneficial ownership.
Greg Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My right honourable friend, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, rightly challenged the government on the use of Chinese slave labour in the manufacture of solar panels. Chinese companies also dominate the mining companies using slave labour to extract cobalt in the DRC. So how much more needs to happen for the government to challenge this evil use of slave labour, particularly by the Chinese state?
Minister.
Mr Speaker, just following on from the Foreign Secretary's comments, the Honourable Gentleman will know that we stand resolute in the support of human rights around the world, including in supply chains, and that is something that we continue to raise with governments and in the international community at every available opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. The incarceration of Jimmy Lai and the persecution of Hong Kongers in the United Kingdom by China is deeply, deeply wrong and disturbing. Can I ask the Secretary of State what action will the UK be taking to make sure that our concerns are heard and action is also taken to protect Hong Kongers living in the United Kingdom?
Secretary.
Well, I can tell my honourable friend that I raised the case of Jimmy Lai during my meetings in China, and we will continue to raise this case because it is immensely important to us, and we believe that he needs to be released as swiftly as possible. And he will also know that we take immensely seriously the safety of Hong Kongers across the UK and will always stand firm against any kind of transnational repression.
Christine Jolly.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. It may be difficult to believe watching the football shots from America, but a great number of Scottish football fans were refused ESTAs at the last minute after they had previously been approved, costing them thousands and cancelled airfares and hotels. So can the Minister tell us, have there been conversations with the American authorities about how this has happened, avoiding it, and can she impress on them perhaps the economic loss they'll face through all those alcohol sales?
Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, we of course wish Scotland very, very well and congratulate them on their success in the game against Haiti. But she raises an important point. I have raised these issues with the US government, and indeed so have our embassy in Washington. Obviously, I can't comment on individual specific cases. What I would urge all constituents to do who are travelling to the United States to the World Cup is to follow the US guidance online, and obviously, if they have any challenges, to speak to the US Embassy.
Imran Hussain.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Kashmir, the Foreign Secretary will know that I've written to her with the support of over 60 parliamentarians to raise concerns around the serious escalation in tensions in Azad Kashmir, including reports of bloodshed, arbitrary arrests and now food blockages. Will the Foreign Secretary reassure this House that she will use all diplomatic levers open to her to push for peace and justice in Kashmir, including the lifting of the lockdown, the restoration of all communications and the immediate resumption of peaceful table talks, at the heart of which must remain the respect for Kashmiri human rights?
I thank my honourable friend for his question, and he will know how seriously we take the situation and that we continue to monitor the situation closely, including, as has been raised, the impact on British nationals, and to make sure that we continue to engage with the government of Pakistan where appropriate. It is a situation we do want to see come to an end.
Martin Vickers.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Last month, along with other members of the All-Party Group for Gibraltar, I visited the ROC in order to assess first-hand responses to the proposed treaty. Could the Minister give us an update on progress of the treaty and when he anticipates it being finalised?
Minister. Well, I thank him for his consistent advocacy in relation to Gibraltar. We're committed to finalising this imminently. The draft treaty text is undergoing its final legal checks, and a draft was deposited, as he knows, previously in the House within a summary on the 26th of February. We're looking forward to signature imminently, and the provisional application is expected on the 15th of July.
Douglas McAllister.
Mr Speaker, can I thank the Foreign Secretary for raising the case of my constituent Jagtar Singh Johal during her recent visit to India? Can she update the House if these discussions were positive, and are we any closer to securing his release and return home to West Dunbartonshire?
Foreign Secretary.
My honourable friend is right. I did raise this case while I was in India. I know how much my honourable friend has been championing the case of his constituent. We have raised it. There is, I think, long concern about the length of time without resolution on this case, and we will continue to raise it.
Final question, Monica Harding.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the world has failed Sudan. We know that the International Fact-Finding Mission has noted evidence of a genocide following the fall of El Fasher. So what is the UK doing as penholder at the UN to ensure that the belligerents responsible are being held to account and the state actors who are aiding and abetting them?
Well, I can tell the honourable member I'm continuing to raise Sudan in every international forum. We have to keep a spotlight on what is the worst humanitarian crisis of the 21st century. That includes shining a spotlight on international arms flows, more than a dozen countries involved in that, but it also involves the pressure on the parties involved to agree some kind of ceasefire or humanitarian truce so that we can get humanitarian support in and start building a better future for Sudan.
Let the front bench change over. Point of order comes after statements. We come to the statement. Secretary of State Emma Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I begin, this is a solemn day as we remember our dear friend and colleague Jo Cox, who I got to know when we were living in Brussels in our 20s. I want to take the opportunity to pay tribute to her formidable sister and their family for all the vital work they're doing to honour her memory. Mr. Speaker, I would like to make a statement regarding the position of Thames Water and the proposed recapitalisation package currently under consideration. This government was elected with a clear mandate to clean up our rivers, lakes and seas, having inherited record levels of pollution incidents from water companies. Thames Water has underperformed for 15 years. It has regularly missed performance targets, it has unacceptable levels of serious pollution incidents, and the company is heavily indebted. Mr. Speaker, this situation, which delivers poor outcomes for consumers and the environment, cannot continue. To fix this, over the course of the last 2 years, the company has been undertaking a recapitalisation process to seek vital long-term funding. The government has been clear throughout this period that any investor will need to have a credible and robust turnaround plan, the implementation of which must be monitored by regulators and must restore the company's financial resilience and operational performance. Ofwat, with the support of government, have been in discussions with the London and Valley Water Consortium, a group of Thames Water's creditors, regarding the terms of a proposal. On the 6th of March, the consortium presented their proposal for Thames Water to both Ofwat and government. Ofwat have been continuing their discussions with the consortium since then. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to update the House on the next stage of this process. Ofwat is currently evaluating the consortium's proposal, and as the independent regulator is responsible for making a decision as to whether to accept or reject it. If Ofwat decides to accept the proposal, this would be subject to a public consultation and a court-sanctioned restructuring process. A recapitalisation process of this size is complex and will take time. As the Environment Secretary, I have several duties as set out in Section 2 of the Water Industry Act. This includes protecting consumers, securing the proper delivery of water and sewage services, ensuring that companies can finance those services, and that statutory obligations are properly carried out. Mr. Speaker, today I can confirm that I have sent a letter to Ian Coucher, Ofwat's chair, outlining my early views on the proposal linked to my Section 2 duties. These should not be taken as, nor do they constitute a direction from government to Ofwat. I do not believe, Mr. Speaker, that the current proposal goes far enough to protect customers and the environment. I have three particular concerns about the proposal: the unfair cost to customers, delays to vital infrastructure investments, and delays to environmental improvements. The 16 million Thames Water customers are front and centre of my consideration, and I am primarily worried about the impact on them. There is an expectation in the proposal for customers to fund and therefore bear an undue cost for investment in the company. In addition, I'm not convinced about the proposal's request to reduce performance standards and about the significant delay to vital infrastructure investments needed. This would mean delays to environmental improvements, particularly those related to wastewater treatments linked to statutory requirements, as well as to projects that are important for drinking water safety and supply. I am therefore concerned that the long-term resilience of the water and wastewater systems may not be adequately protected. Mr Speaker, the Government will always act in the national interest, and my priority as Environment Secretary is protecting customers and the environment. We will stand ready for all eventualities. Mr Speaker, I want to conclude by emphasising this Government's commitment to turning around the water sector. In under 2 years, we have taken swift, decisive action, introducing the Water Special Measures Act to raise standards, enforce accountability and make pollution cover-ups a criminal offence, banning more than £4 million in bonuses for polluting water bosses, unlocking £104 billion of private investment to rebuild vital infrastructure, and commissioning Sir John Cunliffe to lead the most comprehensive independent review of the water sector since privatisation. Together, these steps have paved the way for the landmark Clean Water Bill in the King's Speech, which fulfils the commitments we set out in the Water White Paper earlier this year and will deliver the fundamental reforms that are so desperately needed. This once-in-a-generation bill will create a single, powerful water regulator and move away from a system where water companies mark their own homework by putting in place stronger, active supervision. This will strengthen water companies' financial resilience and the long-term stability of the sector, with modernised economic regulation and new powers to drive turnaround where companies perform poorly. Additionally, the reforms will strengthen the consumer advocate to provide a more independent, authoritative voice that can challenge the system, drive improvements in outcomes and ensure customers' interests are put first. We will also improve water quality by cutting pollution at its source. Finally, Mr Speaker, we will avoid the situation we are discussing today happening in the future. Our reforms will give the new regulator powers to ensure water companies do not accumulate unmanageable levels of debt. More broadly, they will secure the long-term stability of the sector and ensure that companies are financially resilient. Put simply, our reforms will deliver better outcomes for customers and the environment. And, Mr Speaker, I commend this statement to the House.
Can I first of all thank the Secretary of State for coming to the House at the earliest opportunity to update members before making announcements elsewhere. She is a shining example to her Cabinet colleagues of how this House should be treated. I now must call the Shadow Minister, Victoria Atkins.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And may I first of all echo the Secretary of State's comments and remembrance of her dear colleague Jo Cox. Her loss was felt across the House and across party political lines, and I send all of our very best wishes to her loved ones and her friends. Well, thank you, Mr Speaker, and thank you to the Secretary of State for advance sight of this statement and for briefing call on this announcement. And indeed, Mr Speaker, as you know, I've been trying for months to coax the Secretary of State to the dispatch box to explain major events within her portfolio, from their EU handover negotiations to their lack of support for farmers. And finally, she emerges into the light. We all assumed that it would be to announce progress towards resolving the many issues facing Thames Water and their customers. Instead, it is a statement about a letter to the regulator. Now, there is nothing new in this statement. There is no change in the situation of Thames Water, and still no certainty for bill payers. Thames Water has repeatedly failed its customers and the environment with a record of pollution, leakage and chronic underinvestment. The latest figures lay this bare. The company is responsible for around a third of the nation's worst pollution incidents, even as bill payers face steep increases in their bills. And these are not abstract failures. Untreated sewage has been poured into the rivers and chalk streams that local communities cherish, while customers are asked to pay more for less. The priority now must be a financial arrangement that keeps the company afloat and protects bill payers and taxpayers. Now, whilst her government is in chaos, paralysed by the Prime Minister's weakness and the Mayor of Manchester's leadership ambitions, Thames Water continues to fail. If no deal is reached, Thames Water could collapse, again at enormous cost to taxpayers. The Secretary of State has said she does not want a scenario where customers pick up the bill for the company's failures. But when the Conservatives tried to amend the Water Special Measures Act to prevent consumers being on the hook in the event of a company going into special administration, and tried to impose a lending ratio limit on water companies to prevent this situation happening again, Labour voted it down. Why? I also remember when, under the former Secretary of State, an investor pulled out of a previous rescue deal, partly due to political risk. In other words, he had talked himself out of a deal. How is the current Secretary of State avoiding the failures of the now Secretary of State for Housing? And there are those who are urging nationalisation, a word thrown around carelessly. In fact, I think I've heard it just now, by Labour backbenchers and by Reform. None of them explain that nationalisation would be extremely costly to the taxpayer, potentially up to £20 billion, which is equivalent, to those who are wondering what that means, it's roughly equivalent to the defence funding shortfall about which we have heard so much in recent days. But there are reasonable concerns about how Thames Water's failures will be managed during the government's restructuring of the sector and the abolition of Ofwat. So please, can the Secretary of State confirm that there will be no downgrade or dilution to the existing penalty regime which has been briefed out into the newspapers? Can she set out what safeguards Thames Water will be taken to ensure that Thames Water remains fully responsible for its environmental and operational failures? How will the government ensure bill payers are not left bearing the cost of past mismanagement? And has the government offered or begun any process to recommend an alternative deal? Public trust in the water industry is already at rock bottom. Ministers have still not explained how investment in the sector will actually be paid for. Indeed, the Secretary of State's predecessor had to admit that the so-called private water industry investment, which I see the Secretary of State's repeated today, is in reality paid for by higher bills. Families already struggling with the cost of living should not become the safety net for a company that rewarded its executives whilst letting its infrastructure crumble. This is an important moment for the government to show that it can balance financial stability with strong regulatory oversight, and to put accountability and the interests of bill payers and the environment at the heart of water reform. The government must now deliver on the big promises they made during the election for the water sector.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I just say, I'm always happy to receive brownie points, so thank you for what you said. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Right Honourable Lady rightly says that untreated sewage has been poured into our waterways. Yes, for the long years that her party was in government. When they cut the enforcement budget of the Environment Agency, moved to an approach where water companies mark their own homework, the so-called self-monitoring approach, and I find that she has some brass neck in lecturing us when we saw this series of failures under her government. The reason that we are here today, the reason that we as a government inherited record levels of pollution in our waterways was a failure by the government of the Right Honourable Lady to see what was happening before their eyes. A failure of regulation, a failure of the regulators, and a failure of the previous government. I am proud of what we have achieved in the 2 short years that we've been in power, Mr. Speaker. I am proud of the Water Special Measures Act. When did the Conservatives ever cap polluting water bosses' bonuses? Never. She lectures me about amendments to our Act. Our Act did more in less than a year than they did in 14 years to ensure that we had a fairer deal for customers and a better deal for the environment. She asks about nationalisation. I would just gently say that the special administration regime isn't the same as nationalisation, and she's Yes, okay. No, I'm just clarifying for the House. I don't wish to have an exchange with her across the ballot box, if I can. Dispatch box. Dispatch box. That might be at some other point. Dispatch box, if I can possibly help it. There is a difference between the two. Nationalisation would be taking, obviously, ownership by the government of the company, but a special administration regime would be the government financing a special administrator appointed by the courts to run the company. She talks about public trust in our water sector being at record lows. Well, all I can say is that we are clearing up their mess. It was under their government that Thames Water was plunged into unmanageable levels of debt.
Sorry. Can I just say to this, please, just let me hear it as well. We don't need a rumbling commentary all the way through it. I make sure that we're listening to you, Kevin.
And I have to say, I'm not surprised that there aren't many backbenchers on her benches, given the terrible record of the Conservatives when they were in power on the water industry. We are taking forward in our Clean Water Bill, which will be introduced later in the session, a once-in-a-generation reform of the water sector that is desperately needed to introduce a powerful single regulator that holds water companies to account.
Chair of the Environmental Audit, Toby Perkins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thames Water customers are paying the price for the incompetent regulation that allowed Macquarie's to saddle the company with eye-watering debts at the same time that the environmental performance was so disgraceful. And that debt ultimately led to the following shareholders to write the equity value down to zero, and it is those who bought the debt who are now making this proposal. Now, I entirely understand why the Secretary of State would not want customers to receive a service that failed in its environmental responsibilities whilst customers paid higher bills. But what assessment has she made as to whether there actually is a viable business there? We've been told this is the final offer from that company. Is there a viable business there that will deliver a long-term investment within a reasonable cost window for bill payers? And if there is not, then at what point does a public administration become inevitable?
Chair of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I set out in my letter to the regulator, Ofwat, I am concerned that the proposal will mean delays in environmental improvements, delays in improvements to water infrastructure, and as he rightly said, the cost and the unfair cost being laid at the door of Thames Water customers. He asks about whether it is a viable business and next steps. I would say to him, this is a stage in the process where I have given my early views on this proposal. It is now for Ofwat to decide what to do next, and we wait to see what happens.
Tim Farron, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd start off by associating myself very closely with the remarks that the Secretary of State made about Jo Cox. It's an absolute privilege to serve alongside her in this place, and we still miss her very deeply indeed. I'm also very grateful to the Secretary of State for advance sight of the statement and for the very helpful briefing that I had earlier on. Since Conservative privatisation 35 years plus ago, £85 billion of bill payers' money has flowed out like a torrent into the pockets of mostly overseas shareholders and executives paying themselves unearned bonuses. That money could and should have gone into cleaning up our waterways, modernising infrastructure. Instead, sewage was released into our lakes and rivers and seas for 1.8 million hours last year, over 100,000 of those in the Thames region alone. Instead, 20% of our water leaks out of its pipes before it even reaches our homes. In Thames Water, even worse, it's 25% of that water wasted. And now its investors are asking for more time, for more opportunity to take the money before they inevitably run. The Secretary of State is right then that the creditors' offer is a disgrace. They get to keep making money, and Thames bill payers get to pay even more to keep them going, and they get the privilege of seeing long overdue infrastructure improvements delayed for yet another decade. Mr. Speaker, Thames are taking the mickey. The Liberal Democrats say no more and no thanks. It is clear that Thames Water have failed in their basic performance as a water company, and that gives the Secretary of State all the reasons she needs to place Thames into special administration. So why is she not doing that instead? Her letter to Ofwat is, I'm afraid, a sign of dreadful weakness, that she has to beg an equally weak Ofwat to show a resolve that they institutionally lack. Thames have failed in their performance, so just put them into special administration and then migrate the company to a mutually owned model where the bill payers own the company and call the shots, so that investment does get made, that sewage spills stop, that water leaks cease. And by doing that, she could begin the process whereby all of our water companies are owned not by private equity and overseas investors and not by the sluggish state, but by the people. If she would do that, she would win the favour of people from Witney to Windermere. Why doesn't she stop faffing about and do that instead?
I'd like to thank him for, I think, his support for my statement today. Slightly half-hearted. Thank him for what he said about he's right to say that there has been serious pollution incidents in different water companies, but particularly in Thames, and that is something of grave concern to the public and Thames Water's customers in particular. I'd point out to him that on the special administration regime, there are two types of SARs. An insolvency SAR is an insolvency process and is for the company directors to determine. A performance SAR, however, would be triggered if a company is in serious breach of their statutory duties or the company breaches an enforcement order that is so serious that it's inappropriate for the company to retain its licence. The government stands ready for all eventualities, including a SAR.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Secretary of State confirm that in the event of a special administration regime, any compensation would be based on appropriate value, as set out in the case of Lithgow versus the UK, not on regulated capital value, as suggested by the Shadow Secretary of State? For Thames, appropriate value would take account of the 23 billion in infrastructure repairs needed to meet condition P of its licence and comply with its statutory obligation, as well as the 13 billion of dividend and debt interest already paid to creditors, and therefore appropriate value would be nil. The Secretary of State said Ofwat is responsible to take the decision to modify the licence. I urge her to read subsection 7 of 12A of the Water Industry Act. She has the power to overrule.
I thank him for his question. I think there are a number of questions there. As I've said, there is a difference, obviously, between a special administration regime and nationalisation. He talks about regulatory capital value. He is right to suggest that the price of any company is a complicated matter. But obviously, a special administration regime, the state would look to recoup the investment that it's made on SAR exit, if that was what happened. But in nationalisation, it would be a different matter.
Louis French. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What assurances can the government give today to my constituents across Bexley that the £88 million of investment currently underway in our community to secure our fresh drinking water supply for the next 50 years is not derailed by this announcement by the government, which adds to further uncertainty for Thames Water and its customers?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think it is right that both the regulator and the government hold Thames Water to account. And I find his question slightly bizarre. I would say to him I would reassure constituents of his and other customers of Thames Water that we as a government will always ensure continuity of service. But I make no apology for making sure that customers are front and centre of my consideration of this proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Minister for her statement? Thames Water are by far the worst for sewage spills, pollution incidents, flooding across overloaded sewer systems, customer complaints, regulatory penalties, the list goes on. A robust, proactive regulator is a step in the right direction, but is it not the case that a company so bad should be taken over by putting Thames Water into special measures so it can start over again and work in favour of residents rather than the shareholders as an example to others that enough is enough?
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is right to say that Thames Water has a terrible record going back quite some years, as I said in my statement, 15 years at least, and he's right to say that sewage spills in the Thames Water area are completely unacceptable. As I said, the government stands ready for all eventualities, including a special administration regime.
Bob Black. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State is absolutely right to put customers at the forefront here. The problem is, in her statement, she says all of this is going to take rather a long time to do and to unwind.
And at the moment, the uncertainty is the real concern for customers, particularly if they're going to be charged extra money on their bills. She has given, obviously, a letter to Ofwat. What changes specifically does she want to see in the deal to encourage her to give her agreement to the deal so that we can actually move forward on this rather than have uncertainty?
Well,
Secretary of State.
Quite simply, I don't want customers to pick up the bill for the repeated failures that we've seen by Thames Water. I hear his concerns about uncertainty. I would like to see this situation resolved.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. If you Google Caledonian Road in my constituency, you'd think it was a river, but it isn't. In the last decade, Thames Water has delivered to Islington 7 major floods. Since privatisation, Thames Water has delivered to shareholders £7 billion. Last year, Thames Water delivered to my constituents 31% increase in the water rates. Residents are fed up, businesses are fed up, I'm fed up, I'm sure the government is fed up. How much more do we have to take before Thames Water is finally given the boot?
I thank my right honourable friend for her question. She is absolutely right to emphasise the appalling record of Thames Water and the impact that it's having not just on her constituents but on the businesses in her constituency. As I said, there's 2 different options for a special administration regime and we remain open to all eventualities.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 10 months ago, the government appointed FTI Consulting to advise it on taking Thames Water into special administration. Can she update the House of the outputs of that work and how much it has cost to date?
I thank him for his question. We have appointed FTI Consulting in the event that there is a special administration regime. That's the right thing to do in order to prepare for that eventuality and have that contingency in place. I haven't got the figure at my disposal, I'm afraid.
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. And the Secretary of State is absolutely right when she says that Thames Water has let down my constituents and Londoners more broadly, with years of chronic underinvestment while paying record levels of bonuses and dividends. I recently visited my local sewage works and saw proposed improvements to increase storm surge capacity on site and improve the filtration levels to clean up our waterways. Will the Secretary of State assure me and my constituents that these much needed improvements which are planned will not be further delayed with ongoing institutional uncertainty about the future of Thames Water, so we can finally turn the page on 14 years of Tory neglect of our waterways?
I thank him for his answer, and I absolutely want to turn the page on the failures that we've seen of this company to his constituents and others in the chamber. I would say to him, thanks to our legislation that he voted for the Water Special Measures Act, polluting water companies do not now receive bonuses. He's right to suggest that we need to resolve this situation and make sure that those improvements he talked about, which is why I have put forward my early concerns about this proposal, is I don't want to see such significant delays to those sorts of improvements.
Sir Julian.
It's tempting to say that there's a particularly bad smell about this company, but that would be a statement of the obvious. I have a feeling, though I'm not normally a friend of nationalisation, that this company is on a one-way journey to bankruptcy. If that point ever arises, am I right in presuming that there would be no question of compensation to shareholders for a bankrupt company that eventually had to be taken over by the state?
Thank him for his question. The company remains solvent, but if it were to become insolvent, it would be for the directors to apply to the court for an insolvency special administration regime, and then those questions would be on the table.
West. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. What reassurances can the Secretary of State provide about basic customer services around, for example, Turnpike Lane Tube Station in my constituency closed since last August because Transport for London cannot reopen it due to the leaks and the problems which Thames Water is far too incompetent to fix. Will today's statement lead to better customer service?
I'm really sorry to hear about the circumstance in her constituency, and I'm happy to raise that with the regulator. We need to get that fixed as soon as possible.
Leila Moran.
Mr. Speaker, in recent months, 35,000 houses in West Oxford have had their water pressure cut by Thames Water, some as much as 50%. Veronica in Oseley Island says her upstairs shower is now nothing but a dribble and is barely usable. This isn't a service, it's a scam. And it's my constituents who are having to foot the bill for this service. Their bills were put up last year. So could the Secretary of State explain to them, what are we waiting for? Why can't we just let this failed company fail and start again?
I thank her for her question, and I absolutely understand why she and her constituents are fed up with the poor performance of this company. That is why I have written to Ofwat to express my concerns. I do not want her constituents picking up the bill for this poor performance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I thank the Secretary of State for her statement? Residents in Dartford have for far too long put up with very poor performance and high water bills in the constituency. For instance, in terms of performance, it's extremely likely that Thames Water leaks contributed to the collapse of the Galley Hill Road in 2023, resulting in Swanscombe residents being pretty much trapped in their town over the last 3 years. So it's absolutely vital, as the Secretary of State says, that the company should not have their performance standards diluted or protection from fines as a result of the deal that's on the table. So does the Minister agree that any deal must put consumers and environmental protections first, and that investors should not benefit at the expense of bill payers and vital infrastructure improvements?
Yeah, I thank him for the question. As I said in my statement, customers are front and centre of my consideration of this serious issue. The Environment Agency will continue to investigate any pollution incident or any breach of statutory obligations of any water company, including Thames Water, and will continue to take enforcement action against those companies, including fines.
Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a huge list of complaints about Thames Water across mid-Buckinghamshire, and I'm sure that list is identical for the Secretary of State next door in Wickham, and so I add my voice to the calls for real detail from colleagues on this side about the plan and not just ambition. But in the meantime, there is something that is causing Thames Water and indeed every other water company to chase their tails, and that's their inability to have a proper voice in the planning system, so that when villages like Ickford in my constituency, which already has its sewage pumped away by road in tanker because the system just can't cope, is told you've just got to connect another 90, 100, 150 properties, it's never going to work. So what action can the Secretary of State take in the meantime to ensure that this huge demand on house building and data centres in Buckinghamshire, the water companies can actually have their say and say no when they can't do it?
I thank my neighbour for his question, and like him, I've had complaints about this company in my own constituency. With regard to the broader question that he raises, can I reassure him that when we bring the Clean Water Bill to the House, there will be provisions for more intense regional planning, which involves water companies, local authorities and other stakeholders, so that we can avoid the sort of situation that he's talking about.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituents have been catastrophically failed by Thames Water over many years, with major floods that have closed local businesses, constant leaks and bursts and traffic disruption, loss of supply, terrible support for vulnerable customers when that happens. This is the consequence of shocking negligence by asset stripping investors, and there is no evidence that Thames Water can recover itself or that it will ever have a credible plan to deliver. So can I welcome the Secretary of State's statement today, and can I ask her for further detail on the timescale for resolving the situation? When does she expect Ofwat to reach a decision on the offer from investors? How will she ensure that following such a decision, action is taken swiftly to bring this scandal to an end, to bring Thames Water back into special administration so that it can be run for the public good and for the good of the environment?
I thank my honourable friend for her question. She's right to raise the impact that this has on local businesses as well as residents in her constituency. I spoke to the chair of Ofwat yesterday evening, as well as sending the letter, and I know that the chair and the board of Ofwat are considering this proposal in great detail, and I suspect that we will hear from them soon.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Enough is enough, surely. The sight of US hedge funds picking over the carcass of Thames Water's pipe network, frankly, is revolting. It stinks. And we are seeing their plan includes $750 million of payments to hedge funds, shareholders, debt holders and bankers. It's completely unacceptable. Thames Water is bust. It is insolvent. Now is the time. Put it into a special administration. It can't meet its financial obligations. It can't meet its performance obligations. I urge the Secretary of State, get on with it, put it into SAR, and then buy it out for £1 and a good deal for the taxpayer.
Well, can I welcome him to the party? It was a long time coming, I think. I don't remember any mention of the sewage crisis in the Reform Manifesto at the last election.
Daniel Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I think there's amnesia from some members opposite who forget the asset stripping that happened, which has led to the position of infrastructure failing across Bexley and Crayford and that 30% increase we saw last year. Now, we have tried every option to try and keep this company organisationally solvent, but my patience and the patience of my constituents across Bexley and Crayford is running out, quite frankly. So can the Secretary of State outline how ready we are as a government if we do need that special administration to take this company into that ownership model, because there is, I think our patience, as I say, in Bexley and Crayford has run out.
I thank my honourable friend for his question, and I think you know that we have seen really poor performance over a number of years, and I absolutely appreciate his impatience on behalf of his constituents. He is right to express that. One of the problems that we've had in the regulatory regime is that the current economic regulator didn't step in and stop this company being put into a situation where it has unmanageable levels of debt, very high levels of debt. In our Water White Paper, but also in the Clean Water Bill, as I said in my statement, the new regulator will have new powers and responsibilities to ensure that companies don't get into that situation in the first place.
Sarah Green.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Communities like Chalfont St Peter have suffered appalling circumstances in recent years, including flooding and sewage bubbling up through the drains. Thames Water has promised capital investment to address these issues. So what assurances can the Secretary of State give that customers won't be asked to pay the price for years of financial mismanagement through higher bills, and that any future restructure or special administration regime won't mean those existing capital investment commitments are lost?
I thank my neighbour for her question. She is right to talk about the problems in her constituency that I know very well. And can I just say to her that the reason that I sent this letter yesterday evening is precisely because of the issue that she underlines, which is that I don't want to see severe delays to this sort of capital investment that is necessary to improve the situation, as she has suggested, and I don't want customers to pick up the bill for it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to echo tributes for Jo Cox, who I worked with when she was at Oxfam. We miss her greatly. My constituents of Putney, Roehampton, Southfields and Wandsworth Town have been let down by Thames Water for years. Tories lost any grip of this and cut back the Environment Agency. In 2025, Thames Water dumped sewage in the Thames for over 107,000 hours. But bills are rising, and I get constant emails from constituents because there's nothing to show for it. They are paying the price. So I welcome the Secretary of State standing up for customers and the environment over this dreadful bill. What would she say to my constituents to assure them that they will not have to pay any more for this investment fund masquerading as a public service?
I thank her for her question. She puts her finger on the issue here, and as I said in my statement, there are three principal reasons that I have sent to Ofwat my early concerns about this proposal, and one of those reasons is delays of the investment that we need to ensure that there are improvements to environmental performance, which I know is an issue of concern across the House, and I don't want to see customers pick up the tab for that delay either.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, isn't it clear that 30 years of the regulatory system has absolutely failed in the face of the greed and incompetence and profit-taking of Thames Water? And surely to goodness it is time that Thames Water stopped being allowed to continue with this disastrous policy, was brought into public ownership, and a public ownership with a difference that includes local authorities, local communities, the workforce rather than the directors who do know something about water delivery, so we can have efficient supply, an end to the flooding that happens in my constituency and others, and the abominable pollution of the Thames and the seas all around this country caused by the greed of the directors of Thames Water.
So stay.
I don't always agree with the right honourable gentleman, but can I say on this issue that I agree with him that there's been real regulatory failure here. There's been a failure of the regulators, a failure of the regulation itself, the Conservative decision to cut the enforcement budget of the Environment Agency, a shift towards self-monitoring, which essentially was water companies monitoring their own homework. It's basically like telling Ofsted not to visit any schools. I mean, that was the equivalent of the regime that we saw under the Conservatives. And he's right to say that customers and the environment need to be at the heart of the solution to this.
Laura Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We all have these examples of Thames Water letting our residents down. Just last week I heard from one of my farmers who's had Thames Water discharging raw sewage into the ditch next to his fields. It's flooded his fields and contaminated the land, and it's no longer in use. So I welcome the progress from the Secretary of State, but as she acknowledges, more may well be needed. If so, can she reassure my constituents that she will always put the interests of consumers, the environment and also public health first ahead of the interests of investors?
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with her more. As I said in my statement, customers are front and centre of my consideration of this issue, and you know, it's completely unacceptable that farmers are also suffering the consequences of the raw sewage crisis that we've got in our country, and they shouldn't be having their land contaminated. That is their livelihood, and it takes a great deal of work and cost in order to decontaminate that land.
Lord Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will she guarantee that no taxpayer money will be used to bail out Thames Water or its shareholders?
Minister.
Well, we have to see. So I have sent a letter to express my early concerns about this situation, and we remain, as a government, open to all eventualities. If there was a special administration regime, which I know some people are calling for, then obviously the government would be financing a special administrator to run this company. That would have to happen because we would have to have continuity of service. If he doesn't want that to happen, he has to suggest an alternative.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and could I thank the Secretary of State for her statement and also for the robust way that she's standing up for residents and for the environment on this very important issue. My constituents are appalled by the sewage pollution in the River Thames, and they are also appalled by the poor quality of customer service offered by Thames Water. We've had numerous breaks in supply, other issues. We had an issue with subsidence, which closed the road in Reading as well. So can she tell me more about the process that we follow by Ofwat and the action she'll take through the Clean Water Bill?
I thank him for his question. And on the Clean Water Bill, the bill will introduce a supervisory regime whereby the new regulator that has more teeth will have a team of people for each and every water company really getting a grip on the performance of each water company and holding that company to account. What we've seen up until now, as I said to the right honourable gentleman, the member for Islington North, is this shift we saw 15 years ago towards a system where companies were basically marking their own homework. That cannot be right. That is not a that is not a proper regulatory system. That is just laissez-faire and letting companies get away with the sorts of pollution incidents that we've seen.
Ella Maguire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thames Water is in crisis. I thank the Minister for not approving this deal. It's sinking under £20 billion of debt. It's like a leaky ship that can't stay afloat. Last year, my constituents are paying on average £203 additional per year. They simply can't continue to pay the price for this failure. So when will the Minister stop pouring money into this leaky ship and put Thames Water into special administration and put everyone out of their misery?
Minister.
I thank her for her question and for her welcoming the fact that I have sent this letter with my early concerns. As I've said to her, there are two different ways for special administration regime. One is insolvency, which is a matter for the directors of the company and then would have to go through the courts, and another is the performance SAR.
Hello, Donegal.
Mr. Speaker, Thames Water is clearly failing its customers and the environment, and I want to thank the government for the action that they've taken this week to be very clear to Thames Water that they will not be allowed off the hook for fines, they will not be allowed off the hook for performance targets, and they must not be allowed to mark their own homework. I wanted to probe her on one specific aspect of their failure. On the Environment Committee, we asked Thames how much they'd spent on all of these legal proceedings to try and avoid a special administration regime. They replied, "We estimate that our legal fees for work done in connection with our liquidity extension transaction as implemented through the interim restructuring plan at the High Court and the Court of Appeal was approximately £67.6 million. That was last June, so I'll be writing to them to ask for an update on those costs. But given that shocking amount being wasted on legal bills, almost 3% of what customers are paying in bills, does the Secretary of State agree with me that Thames Water must be spending their money on fixing broken pipes, not bonuses and not bumper legal payouts?
Yes, we want the priority for Thames Water to be on investing in the water infrastructure that is needed to improve the service it gives its customers and also the infrastructure that it needs to drive environmental improvement.
Dr. Ellie Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Secretary of State has pointed out, Thames Water has 16 million customers. It doesn't serve them, it fails them. 16 million is nearly a quarter of the entire UK population, and they don't get any choice. This is a natural monopoly. We're all stuck with the water company that supposedly serves the area we live in. But what do customers get? Bills going up through the roof, pollution in our rivers and our seas, infrastructure crumbling. Now, the Secretary of State has nodded towards special administration in her statement, which would be an improvement on the status quo, but isn't it time to come clean with the British people, admit the failed privatisation experiment has totally failed, and to take this struggling, failing company back into public ownership where it belongs?
I thank her for her question, and she is right to point out that these are natural monopolies and there is no competition. I don't think nationalisation is a silver bullet in this regard, and I just would point out to her that there are big fiscal pressures that the government is facing with regard to all sorts of other areas, but obviously we stand ready for all eventualities.
It's Waller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thames Water was responsible for a third of all major pollution incidents in 2025. Now their creditors want to jack up my constituents' bills, delay improvements to infrastructure and dodge future fines. My constituents are being failed. So can I welcome the action the Secretary of State has taken today, but urge her to go even further and put Thames Water under special measures?
So State.
I thank him for his question, and it's because of the delays that I'm concerned about to improvements in infrastructure, to environmental improvements, that I have sent this letter to Ofwat. But can I just reassure him on one point? Certainly, in my consideration, I have never even considered the idea that the Environment Agency would let this company off any fines. The Environment Agency will continue to perform their duties in holding water companies to account, Thames Water and all other water companies to account, and enforce against them should they breach their statutory obligations.
Monica Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituents in Esher and Walton are facing an average water bill of £658 per year, and yet Thames Water continues to fail them. Sewage is poured into the River Mole, which runs through my constituency. The wreck next to the Esher treatment works, where children play, has had sewage in it. And I told the House last week that there was sewage outside the local primary school in Thames Ditton, as well as the middle of the village. So will the government get a grip on this regulatory and state failure and put that company into special administration and create a public interest company that serves my constituents properly?
Yeah.
I thank her for her question, and I'm really sorry to hear about the sewage incident outside a local primary school. If she wanted to take that up with me separately, I'm happy to follow that up with her. The government is concerned about the underperformance of this company, which is why I've expressed early concerns about this proposal. And she is right to say that we need to get a solution here that delivers for customers and the environment.
Justine.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My residents are rightly angry that Thames Water has discharged hundreds of hours of sewage into the River Stort, one of our rare and precious chalk streams. I've raised it in this House before, and Thames Water have told me that their improvement plan won't be in place until 2028. That's clearly not good enough. So does the Secretary of State agree with me that this is the latest in a litany of failures by Thames Water? And what assurances will she give my constituents that she will ensure that the need to protect our precious chalk streams will be a priority consideration in the future of Thames Water?
He's right to say that there's been 15 years of failure and the company letting down customers, businesses in his constituency. Can I just say to him that absolutely, as a member in the Chilterns, representing a constituency in the Chilterns, chalk streams are an absolute priority for me as Environment Secretary.
Ollie Glover.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government has been very clear in its support for Thames Water's proposed £5.7 billion Whitehorse Reservoir in Oxfordshire. Given that Thames Water may run out of money within months, what assessment has the Secretary of State made of the risk that a collapse could lead to the government having to bear the cost of that reservoir?
I thank him for that question. As a country, we have failed to build a reservoir for 30 years. That cannot be right. With regard to the specific reservoir that he speaks about, we will have to look at the details, but as it stands, the company is ongoing. It's a solvent company, and it should continue to complete the projects that it started.
Chris Vance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Secretary of State for a statement, and can also thank my humble friend from Hertford and Stort for raising his concerns about the River Stort, which obviously goes past my constituency as well. I spend a number of hours running along it, so I know what a beautiful area it is, and it does need to be protected. Mr. Speaker, I can't tell you the number of people, not just in Harlow, but everywhere I go, who raise their dissatisfaction with Thames Water. I thank the Secretary of State for what she's doing to raise standards, but I am dubious that Thames Water will be able to reach those high standards. If they do not, what is she going to do? Because I know that people in Harlow do not want us to be propping up a company that puts their failures, makes their failures hit the pockets of people. So,
I'd like to thank my honourable friend for Harlow for conveying the concerns of his constituents. Did you say Minister for Harlow? Right. Okay. I didn't quite know that we created that position. But can I just thank him for what he said? The government is prepared for all eventualities, and can I just reassure him that whatever happens, the government will ensure continuity of service for his constituents with regard to water supply and wastewater services.
I'm going to take those who've just got Thames Water. So, Clive Jones, I think you're Thames Water.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Residents in Wokingham have endured years of sewage dumping by Thames Water and ever-rising bills, while stakeholders line their pockets. The current ownership model is unsustainable, so will the Minister consider our call for water companies to be mutually owned public benefit corporations, putting customers and the environment first, rather than prioritising the interests of creditors and financial institutions?
I thank him for his question. Having served in the Treasury as the Economic Secretary, I worked on our plan to double the number of mutuals across the economy. More broadly, not just with regard to Thames Water, I'd be very happy to see more mutual ownership of water companies, but the question is how you get there.
President
Mr. Speaker, the Secretary of State has made absolutely the right decision in seeking to protect bill payers and opposing giving Thames Water a free pass to continue polluting our rivers. The thousands of hours of sewage spills into chalk streams and their tributaries across North East Hertfordshire that Thames Water have continued to oversee are unforgivable, if not technically illegal. Thames Water are failing in practically every possible way. The level of incompetence is staggering, given they have 16 million captive customers. My constituents aren't interested in seeing them being given any more chances, so will the Secretary of State put an end to this unholy mess and rid us of this frank...
What's the honourable member doing? Come on, Chris, you should know better than anybody.
Rid us of this frankly parasitic company once and for all.
I thank my honourable friend for his question, and thank him also for mentioning chalk streams, which, like our other honourable friend, is something close to my heart, given the chalk streams in my own constituency. He's right to say that this is the biggest water company in the country, 16 million. Customers. As I've said, the government stands ready for all eventualities, including a special administration regime, and front and centre of my consideration of this issue are the customers that he talks about.
Victoria.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My very first letter as a Member of Parliament was to Thames Water, following the unacceptable thousands of hours into the River Vere, one of our precious chalk streams. So whatever the future structure of Thames Water, what guarantees can the Minister put in place that the environmental obligations will be strengthened rather than weakened?
Well, can I first say that, as I said to a previous question, the Environment Agency, regardless of how the situation develops, will continue to investigate pollution incidents and enforce and make sure they take enforcement proceedings against any company, including Thames, who are involved in pollution incidents.
Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In March, my constituents in Northley and Ensham went without water for nearly 3 days due to the collapse of a major water pipe. They're angry that 1/3 of their bills go towards Thames Water's ballooning debt and to paying voucher funds like Elliott Associates instead of maintaining and replacing ageing infrastructure. My right honourable friend, the member for Witney, was right to challenge further borrowing by Thames Water in the Supreme Court. Does the Secretary of State now agree with Liberal Democrats that Thames Water's financial model is broken?
Well, as I said in answer to a previous question, what the government seeks to do in the Clean Water Bill is make sure that the new water regulator that will be integrating the functions of Ofwat, the EA, the Drinking Water Inspectorate and Natural England doesn't allow companies to get into the sorts of unmanageable levels of debt that we've seen.
Final question, Charlie Menal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's clear that the Creditors Consortium has material influence over Thames Water, as the consortium is funding the company and bilaterally negotiating with the government. Material influence means the consortium meets the defined criteria of being an ultimate controller. Will the Secretary of State now finally acknowledge this fact and work with Ofwat to enforce it?
Well, can I just say that we are working closely with Ofwat. Ofwat have been talking to this consortium of investors for 2 years. The government has, through my officials, been in discussions with the consortium alongside Ofwat since November. I want to thank all the officials actually who've been involved in these discussions. We need to make sure that we find a way forward that puts customers and environment at its heart.
Right, that completes Secretary of State's statement. We're now going to go to the personal statement. Right Honourable John Healey.
With your permission, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make a personal statement on my resignation as the UK Defence Secretary. Many in the media have pressed me to say more since Thursday, but I'm a proud I took the decision to resign with the very greatest regret and reluctance. I continue to be certain about this decision. In time, I believe it will be seen as necessary in securing the future of our armed forces and of our alliances. It's been the privilege of my life to work alongside the exceptional people who serve this country in defence, military and civilian alike. They work 24/7, so often unseen. They are the very best of Britain. Yeah. They and the new Defence Secretary have my fullest support. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, I've been a Labour MP for nearly 30 years, a Labour member for 45 years, a trade unionist for longer still. It is my family, literally. Jackie, my wife, worked for Labour HQ. We met at a union conference. 2 weeks later, we were engaged. We only ever wanted... Look, we ask so much, all of us, of our partners in politics, but we only ever wanted a successful Labour government leading a stronger Britain. And my decision last week was about our country, not career. I loved the job. I won't miss going to bed with 3 phones or 3 a.m. phone calls. And I'm proud of what we've done in less than 2 years as a Labour government. We've stepped up international leadership for Ukraine. We've raised defence investment 3 years earlier than anyone expected. Won record defence export deals. Given the armed forces their biggest pay rise for 20 years. Brought 36,000 Forces family homes back into public ownership. Yeah. And we've signed major defence agreements with Germany, Norway, France and the European Union. Delivering for defence, delivering for Britain. Yeah. And the Prime Minister has led this drive, rightly earning respect at home and abroad. He and I jointly commissioned the first of its kind strategic defence review, which has set the vision to transform our armed forces, to make our military more war-fighting ready, better able to deter. And we've been doing exactly this in the 12 months since the SDR was published. Delivering in a different way. Investment with deep reforms to get a grip of budgets, procurement and delivery. Investment so that every taxpayer's pound works twice. Once for national security and once to back British industry, create British jobs. Investment in new defence tech, drones and AI that draw lessons from Ukraine for our own UK forces. And I will always seek cross-party common ground on defence, but I won't let the Conservatives forget their record in government or the hollowed-out legacy they left in our armed forces. Mr. Speaker, since the SDR, we've seen the world changing still faster, with threats increasing and demands on defence rising. Conflict in the Middle East, new NATO missions in the High North, the US moving forces away from Europe, intensifying attacks in Ukraine, and increasing Russian aggression towards the UK. NATO has now said we must prepare for war with Russia within the next 5 years. This is the age of hard power and rising threat. This is not the moment for calibration or incremental change. This means bigger politics, bolder priorities, harder choices. And Britain's challenge now is the transformation and the rearmament of our armed forces. The Prime Minister knows what the country needs for defence. He spelled out the threat this month when he said, "It is our intelligence assessment and the assessment of other countries in NATO that there could be an attack by Russia on NATO as soon as 2030. So Britain must set the headmark of spending 3% on defence in 2030 and a clear path to 3.5% in 2035. the commitment all NATO nations have made to each other and to their people. And I believe this would command wide cross-party support. Mr. Speaker, our predecessors in this House experienced what happens when deterrence fails. Our predecessors in this House entrusted us with institutions like NATO that they created to keep us safe. We don't choose the circumstances in which we serve or the responsibilities that fall upon us either in this House or in government. And it's the duty of our political generation now to ready Britain for the uncertainties of the years to come. And the decisions that we make in the months ahead will be judged by those who follow us. At this dangerous time, I see the current defence investment plans falling well short of what is required. A rise of 0.08% from next year to 2030, no date for reaching 3%, no path to 3.5%. By 2030, well over half of NATO members will be spending 3% or more. And when allies are looking for British leadership, we must not fall behind. When NATO needs European nations to step up, we must not fall short. Our adversaries don't follow timetables set by the Treasury. I appreciate how hard this is for Cabinet colleagues, and I'm very grateful to those who support what's required. But not all needs to be done by cutbacks elsewhere. There are credible ways of meeting the mid-term funding challenges, working multinationally, and as other nations in Europe are doing. That could allow us to protect the ability to deliver our Labour missions across government. Beyond this, Mr. Speaker, we need a bigger view of national security. It's not just the job for defence or the agencies. Every department has a part to play in national security and national resilience. From energy to transport to health. Security must run through the government like letters through a stick of rock. And security must be felt in the communities right across Britain, reversing long-term decline and bringing new jobs and new hope. For now, Jackie's just grateful I no longer carry 3 phones in my bag, although I do still have my bottle of HP sauce.
We now come to the next personal statement. Al Cairns.
Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I'd like to make a speech on my resignation. I want to start by echoing the remarks of so many in the House on the 10th anniversary of the death of Jo Cox. Whilst I did not know Jo, I know what she stood for. Her unwavering commitment to equality has left a lasting legacy, and her words still ring true. More in common than divide us. Still true and still worth fighting for. I'd also like to pay tribute to my right honourable friend from Rochester and Coningsborough. This is the second time I have followed you this week, and it's a privilege to do so. Last week I resigned as a Minister for the Armed Forces. It was an exceptionally difficult decision. I've never quit anything in my life, and my mother will confirm that. She tried to get me to quit the Marines for 24 years, but she failed many times. But I spent those 24 years in uniform. I served in operations around the world. I commanded men and women in combat and carried responsibility for their lives. I buried friends and stood beside families receiving the worst news imaginable. So when I accepted ministerial office, I did so with a simple purpose: to serve those that serve us. I remain grateful to the Prime Minister for the opportunity to do so. I thank my ministerial colleagues, the individuals on this side of the House, civil servants, and above all, the servicemen and women I have had the privilege to represent. But there comes a point when honesty requires action, and for me that point came last week. As honourable members know, I came into politics for one reason, and that was to enact change. But to be able to work out where you're going, we must realise where we have come from. The Labour Party I joined is one that was chiselled out of the mines of the North East. It was hammered out of the shipyards of Govan, Liverpool and Belfast, and it was forged in the factories of the Industrial Revolution. Calloused hands, sore backs, people who did a hard day's graft and ask for one thing in return: a government that has their back. That's the tradition I serve in this House, and it's the tradition that shaped that decision I took last week. And I resigned for several reasons. Firstly, because I no longer believed the Defence Investment Plan was preparing for the wars we are most likely to fight. The character of warfare is changing at an exceptional speed. In Ukraine, a navy without a ship has destroyed a navy. A drone costing thousands can destroy a tank costing millions. A drone can now strike 2,000 kilometres into Russia at a fraction of the cost of a fighter jet. It is not either or. It's an equitable mix of high-end sophistication coupled with low-end mass. That's the balance we must seek, but from my view, the Defence Investment Plan did not strike that balance, for various reasons. I want to give just a small example to bring that home, because it can be often lost. In a town in Ukraine similar to the same size as Hereford, in one day, there were 12,000 drones in the air. Just comprehend that, 12,000 drones in the air, and 90% of all casualties are from drones. Not the rifle, not the grenade, not the tank, not the artillery, but from drones. What will it take? I asked the House, what will it take to realise these figures are not fiction? They're not an embellishment of the truth, but a hard fact born out of the blood and the steel of a hot war. That is the maths of modern war. Millions of drones against high-end sophisticated systems that deliver late with huge levels of inflation and, importantly, cannot be reproduced at the pace required to sustain a conflict against a major adversary. What will it take to learn this lesson? Do we need to rerun the snatched Land Rover? Do we need to rerun the lack of body armour? Do we need to rerun the lack of protected vehicles in Afghanistan that I saw impact men and women in the front line? We do not, and we should not. Moreover, as the clouds of war darken Europe's border once more, do we need to learn the lessons our forefathers learnt in World War II or indeed the Cold War? This isn't about individual items of equipment or bespoke defence funding lines, but about preparedness, about unity of purpose, prioritisation and national resilience. We are no longer packaging up our military to deploy to a foreign field, but being ready to fight from here, fight from the home base, for democracy, for the right to self-determination and for European security. The reality is we are spending too much time preparing for last year's war, not tomorrow's. And I urge the House to push for transformation, push hard and push for delivery this side of 2030. Secondly, because even if the plan had been right, it was not adequately funded. I do not lay all the blame at number 10 or number 11. We failed, I failed to make that conversation and that argument. But national security and economic security are not competing priorities. They are the same priority. A country that cannot defend itself will not stay prosperous for long. Put simply, a country that cannot defend itself will struggle to protect its prosperity. And thirdly, I left because I could no longer ignore the continued failure to address the treatment of our veterans in Northern Ireland. It's a difficult issue, and I cannot describe how difficult this fight has been. Whatever the view people have of the Troubles, a country owes a duty to those it sent into harm's way under lawful orders. That duty does not end when that uniform comes off. The Labour movement was built on a simple idea, that the people who do the hard work this country asks of them deserves the backing of the state in return. Too many veterans have carried uncertainty for too long, while others have benefited from political accommodations that were never available to those who served, and I could not reconcile that with my own understanding of duty. But, Mr. Speaker, in slightly more detail, the IRA failed to achieve its political ends through the use of terrorist tactics. We must be exceptionally careful that we do not help them achieve those ends through other means. Constant, never-ending legal wranglings that undermine the contract between the nation and those that serve is neither a good use of taxpaying money nor an effective execution of strategy. Inquests, inquiries and an independent commission creates a hierarchy of truth. It will cost us hundreds of millions for 15 years. Painting the state as an aggressor, supporting our adversaries, political objections and causing untold anguish for those that only ever deployed to protect us. We have neither the political capital nor the resources to spare for this unjust journey. In broader terms, in 2026, security means more than military strength alone. It means secure borders, secure energy, secure jobs, and secure communities. It means knowing that if you work hard and contribute, one unexpected bill will not push your family into crisis. It means knowing your children will have opportunities you did not. These things are connected. They absolutely are. The cost of living is shaped by conflict thousands of miles from here. Hostile states target our infrastructure, our supply chains, our democracy. Energy security shapes economic security. Economic security shapes social cohesion. And importantly, above all else, social cohesion shapes national resilience. The old line between domestic policy and national security is breaking down in front of us. But, Mr. Speaker, our history points the way. In 1945, Britain was exhausted. We were in debt. Our cities had been bombed. Rationing went on for years, and yet Attlee's government did not conclude that Britain could afford one priority. It built the NHS. It expanded the welfare state. It invested in housing. And it took the decision that Britain would become a nuclear power. Those decisions came from the same understanding of what this government for, what Labour is for. A country worth defending should look after its people. A country that wants to look after its people must be secure enough to do so. That is the Labour tradition. It is also, I would argue, the British tradition at its very best. But somewhere along the way, we have stopped thinking like that. We begin treating defence, growth, energy, public services and social mobility as separate conversations. They are not. They are different parts of the same challenge. Whether Britain can still provide security, opportunity and resilience for its people in a more dangerous world. That is why I ultimately concluded I could no longer remain in government. The issue was never simply a defence budget. It is whether government was moving with the urgency the moment demands. We know nearly 1 million young people outside education, employment or training. We know poor mental health costs this country hundreds of billions. We know our armed forces needs modernising. We know our adversaries are becoming more aggressive. We know our energy system remains exposed. We inherited a mess, but the population is fed up of pointing the finger. They're looking to us for courage, clarity and conviction to make the changes at scale and, importantly, the speed that the nation requires. But, Mr. Speaker, I've seen what our country can do. I've seen it in uniform. I've seen it in the communities across the nation. I've seen it on these benches where we are at our very best. The talent, the ideas, the passion, the courage, it's all here. Indeed, we have it all. I resign because I believe Britain and this Labour government can deliver. I believe we can think longer term. I believe we can act earlier. And I believe we can once again build a country that provides security in the broadest sense of the word. Security for our nation, security for our communities, security for our working families, security for the next generation. That is the debate I'm confident this resignation has started. Thank you.
Yeah. We'll let the front benches change over.
Point of order, Sarah Owen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In February, the Women and Equality Select Committee concluded an inquiry into the health impacts of breast implants and harmful cosmetic procedures. We sent our report to the Department of Health for their response on the 18th of February, expecting a response on the 18th of April. We're 4 months on from sending that report. The official response is now over 2 months overdue, and we are still waiting on government. Madam Deputy Speaker, I seek your guidance on what we can do to address this grave delay, which is a significant disrespect, not just to my committee members and to the House of Commons staff who worked on the report, but to the victims of harmful cosmetic procedures. People like Sasha, who nearly died, who gave brave, vulnerable testimony publicly, only to be ignored by the Department of Health and ministers.
I'm grateful for the honourable member for giving notice of her point of order. There is a long-standing and well-understood convention that the government responds to select committee reports within 2 months. Where that is not possible, the department should engage with the committee to explain why. I have no power to compel the department to produce a response, but the Table Office will be able to advise her on how she might pursue the matter further. The Clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
Cyber Security and Resilience Network and Information Systems Bill, as amended in the Public Bill Committee, to be considered.
We'll begin with new clause 2, with which it will be convenient to consider all of the new clauses and amendments as listed on the selection paper. I call the Liberal Democrat spokesperson to move new clause 2.
Do I just start? Yeah. As the Director of the National Cyber Security Centre said, every organisation delivering the UK's critical services relies on uninterrupted digital operations. And disruptions to these operations are not simply an IT issue, it's a national resilience issue. This is a point that the Liberal Democrats wholeheartedly support, and is why we welcome the measures introduced in this bill, which strengthen existing cyber protections to enhance national security. However, as the Liberal Democrats have made clear throughout all stages of this bill, there are many missed opportunities to truly future-proof our country's cyber security, to protect our democracy, economy and national security. I therefore speak today to the Liberal Democrat amendments of this bill, which we think would truly achieve this. First of all, in the scope. Last year, we saw the costliest cyber incident in UK history, with the financial damage caused by attack on Jaguar Land Rover estimating to cost between 1.6 and 2.1 billion, a cost shared between JLR directly and its supply chain. In the public sector, cyber attacks are causing eye-watering costs too. We just need to look back to Redcar's cyber attack, which cost them a staggering £10.4 million. Yet this bill takes no consideration of the significant economic cost that such cyber attacks have, excluding both retail and manufacturing industries, as well as local government from the scope of this bill. NC4 and NC5 address this crucial gap. NC4 would bring in the manufacturing of critical transport equipment and the retail of food and essential goods, where they form a part of the large-scale distribution chain, within the scope of essential categories under this bill. That means companies like Jaguar Land Rover would finally receive the protections and their strategic importance demands and protect their supply chains too. NC5 extends that same recognition to local authorities, whose digital infrastructure underpins the delivery of services that millions of people depend on. The government's own industrial strategy recognises that sustainable and secure growth requires strong levels of cyber resilience across their economy, but their own cyber bill does not live up to this. If a cyber attack brought JLR's production lines to a halt or crippled the digital infrastructure of a council, the damage to our economy and to people's daily lives would be enormous. And these are not the only issues within the scope of this bill. Safeguarding our democratic processes must be treated as a national security priority, and here too the bill falls short. At a time when foreign interference in our elections is not a hypothetical, but a documented and growing threat, the government has chosen not to act. NC8 and NC9 would begin to change that. NC8 would designate the administration of elections and voter registers as essential services within the meaning of the NIS regulations, a straightforward recognition that the machinery of our democracy is as critical as any power grid or hospital network. NC9 would designate political parties as essential services for the purposes of cyber security, extending meaningful protection to the organisations through which the British people exercise their democratic voice. I understand that this bill is not a silver bullet for cyber security, but these amendments make a modest, targeted and entirely reasonable ask that vehicle manufacturing, food retail supply chains, local authorities, our elections and our political parties are brought within scope. And we can see the impact of the lack of action to secure online and cyberspaces by turning to online-generated fraud and scams. Fraud makes up 44% of all UK crime and online technologies, especially AI, are supercharging this. According to reporting in the Times a few weeks ago, research by Lloyds Bank found that Meta's social media sites are a starting point for 76% of purchase scams in the UK, with the value of losses to the UK customers estimated around 66 million in the last year alone. Not only does the government's fraud strategy completely overlook the role of social media giants and big tech in the proliferation of online scams, but this bill fails to explicitly address the risks that fraud and scams pose to critical infrastructure and organisations. This is especially striking considering the government's official statistics on cyber security breaches, showing that phishing attacks, aka scams, remain the most prevalent type of breach or attack by far in the UK. Amendment 1 would change this, amending Clause 8 to explicitly add risks arising from fraud to the list of security threats facing relevant digital services so that they can identify and manage these threats. That's also why the Liberal Democrats are calling for social media giants to be financially liable for scams originating on their platforms, for an online crime agency to tackle these issues and standardise AI labelling. And we must not forget that these threats do not fall solely on large institutions and critical infrastructure. Small and medium-sized enterprises are on the front line of cybercrime, disproportionately targeted and too often without the resources or expertise to defend themselves. Many of the businesses caught up in the supply chains of our critical industries and exposed to the fraud and cyber risks I've described are SMEs, and yet there are no provisions in this bill to help potentially under-resourced SMEs cope with the increasing threat of cyber attacks. NC2 would require the establishment of a dedicated cyber security support services for those businesses. For the Liberal Democrats, backing British small businesses means making sure they are not left to face these threats alone. The Liberal Democrats have also tabled a series of further measures that would make this legislation fit for purpose over the long term. A law is only as good as its enforcement, which is why we are pressing for board levels accountability for cyber resilience under NC10, regular proportionate testing of systems under NC11, and more frequent government reporting every 3 years rather than 5 under Amendment 2. Last week at London Tech Week, when surrounded by experts across the industry, one thing became clear. We think technology is moving quickly now, but with the growth and development of AI, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is the slowest we will ever see change happen again. And that is why we need this framework to evolve, which means reviewing the security risks posed by foreign-linked critical suppliers under NC3, modernising the outdated Computer Misuse Act under NC6, and assessing whether regulators have the resources they actually need to do their job under NC7. These are not radical tasks. They are basic conditions for a cyber security regime that works today and will continue in the future. But there is one amendment that cuts to the heart of this bill and what that should be about. One that asks the fundamental question about Britain's place in a contested digital world. It is the question of digital sovereignty. Because all of the protections we have discussed today for our industries, our democracy, our small businesses mean very little if we do not answer first who controls the digital infrastructure on which all of them depend, and question that at every critical level of the stack that we have critical control over that. This is something echoed loudly by the industry itself. A study by CIVO, a UK sovereign cloud provider, found that 83% of IT decision makers in the country worry about the impact of geopolitical developments on their data sovereignty. And when you look at the numbers, it is not hard to see why. Around 55% of central government organisations report that over 60% of their estate is on the cloud, and the vast majority of that is with just 2 providers, both of them American. We have handed the keys to significant parts of our national digital infrastructure to foreign corporations, subject to foreign laws and exposed to foreign decisions entirely outside our control. This includes our public services. The Liberal Democrats are alarmed at the NHS's growing reliance on complex, opaque digital systems set up by Palantir. With Palantir's background in security and surveillance, that marks a divergence from the traditional relationship between the NHS and firms with specialised medical knowledge. And the procurement process for the federated data platform awarded to Palantir in 2023 is worryingly opaque. We are pleased that the Science, Innovation and Technology Committee has called on the government to exercise the break clause, and we also call on the government to use this break clause and provide a clear timeline for Palantir's removal from the NHS. Even Karp and Zeminska from Palantir themselves said, "The limits of soft power, of soaring rhetoric alone have been exposed. The ability of free and democratic societies to prevail requires something more than moral appeal. It requires hard power, and hard power in this century will be built on software." Now just look at Anthropic. Last week they launched their new AI model, Claude Fable 5. Almost as soon as it was launched, the US government intervened, shutting it down for foreign nationals, both inside and outside the country. Let me put that more clearly. Anthropic closed access to its tools under the direction of the US government. This is a wake-up call. The reliance on the technology that fuels our economy and underpins our services shows we desperately need a sovereign digital strategy. Fable 5 may have just been a feature that only launched for about a day, but imagine if this had been powering processes and public services when it was suddenly cut off by the US government. Crucially, this is also about backing British tech as well as working internationally. A collaborative sovereignty would make us stronger partners globally. That is why we've tabled NC13 and why we'll be urging this House to vote in favour of it today. This new clause would require the government to establish a digital sovereign strategy, one that sets out clearly how ministers will assess, manage and mitigate risk to the security and resilience of our critical systems, and one that places British tech procurement at its centre.
The honourable member give way.
I'm happy to give way.
Thank you. I do thank you for giving way, and I recognise the importance of sovereignty, but there are real challenges. So if the member considers something like Taiwanese chips, how would we deal with their prevalence in our tech market?
I thank the honourable member for his question, but I think this is why we need a strategy. We need to be clear about what priorities the government is making in terms of procurement. We've heard from the National Audit Office that it's often cost, but cost at what cost? What actually do we value when the British government are looking at their suppliers? There has to be a real strategy around that, and that conversation has to be had so that direction is clear, whether it's hardware, software. And of course, working internationally is vital, but being clear about what is important for us, especially in that tech stack, is also an important question. And that's the thing. It is about our security, resilience, but also our economy. To strengthen those developing technology as well as using technology, it's about working together internationally, knowing we have the resilience to look after and to trade our technology stack. I will give way.
Thank the Honourable for giving way. And it is about our security, it is about our cyber security, it's about our resilience. It's about the fact that Belfast, for instance, within a 3-mile radius of Belfast, we have some of the best cyber security resilience in the whole of the United Kingdom. It's about that. It's about the 2,750 employers. It's about the £258 million direct GVA. So does the Honourable agree as well, in relation to our amendments? I think we've got to also recognise that powerhouses like Belfast must be fully integrated into our national cyber strategy. Does the Honourable agree with that? And will she put on record that that's the sort of things we should be aiming for?
I thank the Honourable Member for his intervention. And absolutely, this is the thing. Across the United Kingdom, including in Northern Ireland, there are incredible tech firms and British tech firms, many who have said to me that we are they're procured by other governments and around Europe, around the world, but yet they find their own British government is not using their services or getting the value out of that British technology here, developing our skills, jobs. So absolutely agree with that. We also welcomed the government's hardware strategy announced last week, which at least acknowledges the importance of British procurement. But acknowledgement is not a strategy. NC13 would make it one. And I am pleased to say it's drawn support from across this House. In an increasingly unstable world, the case for British digital resilience, British technology and British sovereign capability has never been stronger. And so I urge members to support this and vote for this clause today. Madam Deputy Speaker, cyber security is no longer a technical matter confined to server rooms and IT departments. It's a question of national resilience, economic strength and democratic integrity. The bill before us takes important steps, but important steps are not enough in today's digital age. With these amendments, we have the opportunity to close the gaps, broaden the protections and build a framework that is genuinely fit for the digital age. Thank you.
Security support for SMEs.
The question is that new clause 2 be read a second time. I call the Chair of the Select Committee, Dame Chionwara.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And it is a pleasure to follow the member for Harpenden and Berkhamsted. Now, I would like to start by making 2 relevant declarations of interest. I worked for the Office of Communications before entering Parliament, and I am currently a Fellow of the Institution of Engineering and Technology. And Madam Deputy Speaker, you may have heard me mention on occasion that I was an engineer before coming into Parliament. And as such, in 2010, I was desperate for issues around technology to come up in Parliament, a subject I actually knew something about, but they rarely did so. In the intervening 16 years, however, things have changed. And now technology issues such as online safety, such as Wi-Fi on trains, such as sovereign technology, such as InfoWars are raised regularly. I welcome the increasing role of technology in all our constituents' lives, but this must go hand in hand with rigorous cybersecurity to protect against threats from both state and non-state actors. As I highlighted in my speech at second reading of this bill, currently the UK's only cross-cutting cybersecurity legislation is that inherited from the European Union. The previous Conservative government failed to update these regulations, leaving us working under an outdated framework. So I really welcome this bill, which seeks to expand the scope of existing cybersecurity regulations to new sectors, strengthen the role of regulators, and grant the government new powers to respond to the threats posed by cybersecurity breaches. We are only as secure as our weakest link, but I'm afraid we still have a number of weak links left. Cyber attacks are having a real financial impact on the UK and are happening at an increasing rate. Last year, according to the Institution of Engineering and Technology, cyber attacks cost UK businesses an estimated £64 billion annually, with 37 billion in direct costs and 26 billion in indirect costs. And last year we also saw the well-documented cyber attack that hit Marks and Spencer's, which left shoppers unable to buy online from the company for months. The company's profits were almost wiped out, down from 390 million to 3 million for the first half of 2025. Now, as a Sparks card holder myself, I was unable to use my card for 6 months, and I fear I may have contributed to those figures. This brings me to my first amendment, New Clause 20, which seeks to designate retail businesses as an essential activity, bringing it within scope of Part 3 of the bill. Retail is the UK's largest private sector employer. It holds large amounts of consumer data. It relies often on dated IT systems. Yet, as I noted during the bill's second reading, the existing scope of this bill would not have prevented or even impacted the attacks on Marks and Spencer or Jaguar Land Rover, despite the significant disruption they caused to our constituents and our economic activity. Indeed, in November, the Bank of England cited the cyber attack on JLR as a factor in its decision to hold interest rates. So while I do believe that the government's plan to promote the new cyber governance code of practice to improve preparedness in sectors like retail is welcome, voluntary measures alone will not deliver consistent adoption of good cyber governance across economically significant sectors such as retail. So according to the government's figures, only 9,680 Cyber Essentials Plus certificates were issued to small and medium-sized businesses between November 23 and October 24. There are an estimated 6 million small and medium enterprises in the UK. So this is not going to address that challenge at the rate at which it needs to be addressed. And I welcome the amendment from the opposition benches to bring retail businesses within the scope of the bill, but I am concerned that it might be too extensive in bringing small and medium-sized businesses into its remit and placing an unnecessary or a disproportionate burden on them. So the revenue threshold of £12 billion within my new Clause 20 provides the necessary specificity to ensure that only large retail businesses, including Marks and Spencer's and Jaguar Land Rover, would fall under the expanded NIS Regulations 2018. This would lead to faster incident reporting, responses and customer notification, and this would be alongside stronger powers, including to deal with non-compliance. Now, turning to my second amendment, New Clause 18, and we have already heard the concentration of the UK's public sector data within a small number of US-owned providers, Amazon Web Services and Microsoft Azure, specifically presents a structural risk to national resilience. Indeed, combined, AWS and Microsoft account for 70 to 80% of the public cloud market, according to the Competition and Markets Authority. Now, part of the issue is that that figure is an estimate. You know, I have put down a series of written parliamentary questions over the last 7 years to find out just how dependent government is on AWS and Microsoft. And this data is not tracked across government. So can I ask the Minister to say how he intends to assess a threat that the government is not measuring? Now, as set out in my committee's report entitled Rewiring the State, Delivering Digital Government, our national resilience is put at risk by the strategic lock-in that these companies have in many of our public services and administrations. Major departments, including HMRC and the NHS, as we heard, are under multi-year agreements that further entrench these cloud infrastructures within the Whitehall ecosystem. Included within my committee's report was evidence we heard from the Open Cloud Coalition, who suggested that DCIT should consider a period of overcorrection, including mandatory recompetition of high-risk or large-scale contracts to break cycles of vendor lock-in. The government is rightly seeking to coordinate cloud contracting, but I believe that this should be done in a way as to ensure more, not less, competition. We would also like to see the detail of how the all-of-government cloud contract will prevent vendor lock-in, and I would like the Minister to outline his engagement with the CMA on the development of the contract. Not only does our reliance on these two cloud services raise practical issues, as seen with the AWS outage in October, but there are questions around data protection. Under the Cloud and Patriot Acts, the US government can compel US companies, including AWS and Microsoft, to hand over data if held overseas. That is in the UK. Now, I'm aware that the Minister may reference our sovereign hosting capability, Crown Hosting, but it only hosts 4% of government legacy services. Would the Minister please outline how the government intends to ensure protection that the public sector makes better use of the services provided by Crown Hosting? Could he also set out how to ensure the government's digital transformation ambitions cannot be derailed at any time by a decision based on the narrow interests of a foreign commercial or state actor? Now, the Minister may choose to argue that this is highly unlikely, but I would point him to the recent decision of the US government to withdraw access to Anthropic Fable 5 model from foreign nationals. Now to my final amendment, new clause 819, which calls on the Secretary of State to consider to conduct a review into the risks provided by foreign state ownership or control of providers of cellular Internet of Things modules. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, I do always like to mention that I was the first Member of Parliament to speak about the Internet of Things in my debate back in 2011. Having, as I already mentioned, worked in technology as an engineer, the threat posed by cyber attacks on the Internet of Things was very real to me from the start of my parliamentary career. Indeed, in 2017, I wrote an article highlighting the threat of cyber attacks on sex toys in a vain attempt to raise the profile of this issue. Common Internet of Things modules, or IoTs, are widely embedded across telecommunications and other critical national infrastructure, as well as in consumer products. In telecoms, SIMs underpin interoperability, monitoring, configuration, and automation in complex multi-vendor networks, including those supporting cellular IoT at scale. While SIMs do not directly control networks, dependent on foreign manufactured SIM-enabled software and tooling poses risks relating to resilience, security, and sovereignty. Chinese attempts to corner the global market in SIMs could have significant national security implications. You know, so embedded in cars, when they're embedded in cars, they transmit the location, route, and even passenger video. And I do not, I hope, need to elaborate on the implications of them being switched off or turned to hostile uses. I'm very happy to give way.
Very grateful to her. She was very prescient then, and it's got worse. There are lots of talks about Downing Street's cars under the previous administration being searched for IoTs. We know about this huge import from bad actors, which is really where we should be worried, such as China and other countries, and that they also know that many of these contain kill switches in them, which would have devastated some of our industry in generating energy, which would be a disaster. But she's right to have raised it and to continue to raise it now.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank the Right Honourable Member for his intervention, and he does well to remind us that the impact of hostile action with these SIMs, such as turning on a kill switch, would be devastating across multiple sectors. Potentially the consumer sector, but also security, automotive, transport, finance. And that is why it is so important to consider it. And I would particularly like to draw the Minister's attention to the list of the US's Federal Communication Commission, so that's their equivalent of Ofcom, their list of equipment and services covered by Section 2 of the Secure Networks Act. Now, this list dictates what technology is legally permitted to be authorised for import and sale in the US. Many companies on the list are owned or controlled by the Chinese state. And I'd like to thank the Minister in the other place for meeting myself and my honourable friend, the member for Dunfermline and Dollar, whose amendment I'm also supporting, and hearing our concerns around the supply of IoT devices. But it was unfortunate that the Minister did not see the need for action. And this is particularly true given that, as I've just said, the US have taken action against Chinese-made goods. And during the recent trip of the British-American Parliamentary Group to the US just last week, we heard that there's likely to be further action taken against cellular IoT specifically. And that could see UK products therefore banned from import into the US if they contain these cellular IoT modules. And we've seen a rapid growth of those devices across, as we talked about, transport, but also energy, water, important to mention, and also health, really important. I'm concerned about the ability of our domestic British businesses to export into the US, given these restrictions, as well as the impact on our security. So I would be grateful if the Minister could set out whether he is looking into this concern. So, in conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, as was eloquently emphasised in the personal statements made by the recently resigned Secretary of State for Defence and Veterans Minister, the first duty of government is the security of its citizens. That is true when it comes to our armed forces and our defence in the real world, as it were. That is also true when it comes to our security in the virtual world. And those two overlap so much more than in the past. I welcome this bill, but I have real concerns around the need to bring retail businesses such as M&S under within its scope. The concentration of the UK's public sector data within a small number of US-owned providers and the implications for technology sovereignty which it raises, and also the risks posed by foreign state ownership of providers of cellular Internet of Things modules. I hope the Minister will address these concerns and deliver the cyber security and resilience our constituents deserve.
Sir Ian Duncan-Smith.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it's always a great honour to follow the Honourable Lady, who talks common sense most of the time she gets up which may be one of the reasons why she's still on the back benches. It's not much achieved. It's not much. If we listen more to those who know something about things, we'd obviously be better off in this Parliament than talking as though we know things, which is invariably wrong. And it is the greatest threat that we face, that bad actors out there are using now this level of technology to get across countries like the UK, but other countries as well. But we somehow here, and it's not a party political point, both governments have failed to face up to this to the degree they have, which is why this bill is welcome, but it's not everything, as she says. It's because we think we can treat the bad actors as though they were normal actors in a commercial sense. But you have a country like China that is using slave labor to undercut markets, that regularly puts IoTs into cars that are manufactured and gets away with it in a way because we need them, we think, more than they need us. And that's the big problem. So she's right to raise it, and I congratulate her for yet again making an excellent speech. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move in due course my amendment on anti-refoulement to the Cybersecurity and Resilience Bill. The reason I do is because there is a good bill, but there are bits missing and others skated over. And I think this is one of the areas that we will come again and again to regret that we haven't done more about this, which is essentially British citizens abroad ending up under the rule of governments that do not believe in the concept of freedom in front of the law, or for that rate anyway, a fair trial as part of that process of habeas corpus, which is, as I say, an English common law right that has gone around the world. So this amendment of mine seeks data sharing with jurisdictions that cannot, a fair trial should be prohibited. This maintains the current legal approach, which generally restricts sharing sensitive information outside the EU. And currently information shared of type enabled by Clause 6, which is in the bill, is prohibited outside the EU. So Clause 6 is weaker than what is going on in the European Union. And I say Clause 6 paves the way, sadly, for such sharing rather than restricting it. This amendment seeks, therefore, to prohibit information sharing to places where the Secretary of State believes that a fair trial simply cannot be obtained. It requires the Secretary of State to consult civil society, human rights experts to identify jurisdictions, universal, not just China, although China is a big player in this, where the right to a fair trial cannot be guaranteed with all decisions subject to mandatory annual reports to Parliament. And that is important. Parliament should be part of this and make decisions about whether it agrees with the government. Now, Beijing is a very good example, has frequently used seemingly legitimate criminal complaints to target dissidents. And Clause 6, if unamended, therefore raises transnational repression risks rather than solving them. The amendment is necessary, I believe, to close that loophole in the bill that currently fails to anticipate politically motivated requests from such totalitarian states. I often say that we should stop speaking about countries like China, Russia, Iran, North Korea as authoritarian states. They are not authoritarian states, they are totalitarian states. Why do I say totalitarian? Because everything in those countries is owned and run by the state. Authoritarian states are often dictatorships, etc., but they're not the same. They are brutal, nasty, but this is a complete system. And so this is about totalitarian states. And Clause 6, I'm afraid, is predicated upon helping other governments obtain justice. The argument of the amendment is that, quite apart from the TNR risks, justice as we understand it cannot be served in a country where there is no essential rule of law, no right to a fair trial, and a judicial system which serves the party. It is a matter of pride, I often say, that perhaps the greatest gift that this country has given to the world is the concept of freedom in the face of the law. And that is the point I made earlier. Habeas corpus came from English common law and dominates so many of the free world's thinking. I mean, it wasn't until the 1970s that some countries in Europe actually practiced habeas corpus. So it wasn't just a case that it was produced by Britain, but also owned by many other countries. And that is at risk here, and we should be the greatest defenders of that right to a fair trial anywhere in the world. And let's just take a few of these countries, for example, as to why this is needed. Let's look at China. Requests were made by authoritarian states, totalitarian states in this particular case, as has been the recent pattern, for example, regarding Interpol notices. This is what happens a lot. The People's Republic of China and other countries have a troubling recent history of very significant transnational repression, hounding dissidents in the UK and cloaking their political persecution in superficially legitimate criminal charges. The PRC is not alone in requesting information on political opponents in the UK. They do it a lot. We can confidently speculate that China will make request of the UK should this bill be passed almost immediately. Let me look at the single biggest case that confronts us in China at the moment, Jimmy Lai. He is a British citizen. I cannot tell you, Madam Deputy Speaker, how endlessly in debates, even under the last administration, we had to fight to get the government to state that he was a British citizen, not a dual nationality citizen. He was a British citizen, proud to be British, had been British all his life, only ever owned a British passport, had never been a Chinese citizen with a Chinese passport. And so the Special Rapporteur on Torture, Alice Gill Edwards, in her 2024 and 25 reports, specifically flagged concerns that evidence obtained through torture is still widely admitted in Chinese courts. She also expressed concerns in late 2024 regarding the case of Jimmy Lai in Hong Kong, noting that evidence allegedly secured through torture in mainland China is and was being used in the trial. And on the 15th of November 24, the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention published its opinion that Jimmy Lai is, and I want to quote here, unlawfully and arbitrarily detained and called for his immediate release. The clause that we are talking about here will not go far enough and does not therefore deal with this, and that is what this amendment is really all about. And the risk of extradition to China from safe third countries. Currently, the UK does not have a bilateral extradition treaty with the People's Republic of China and suspended its bilateral extradition treaty with Hong Kong, something that many of us were calling out for at the time in 2020. In 25, proposed changes to the Extradition Act 2003 would allow cooperation between UK and Hong Kong authorities on a case-by-case ad hoc basis. And the trouble with that is it begins to open that door. The risk of sharing NIS data is not confined to the physical removal of individuals. It also poses a profound threat to national security, the safety of the diaspora within the UK. How often have we heard about that? These totalitarian states do not only seek to extradite dissidents, they seek to silence them through transnational repression and to compromise the UK's own digital resilience. Sharing NIS data with an adversarial jurisdiction is akin to providing a roadmap for a state-sponsored cyber attack. Yeah. For dissidents and human rights defenders living in the UK, NIS data can be used to demonize their activity and de-anonymize their activity too. And this information is frequently used to A, identify and harass family members remaining in their home country, B, conduct targeting, phishing and surveillance against the individual's private devices, and C, coerce the individual into becoming an informant under the threat of criminal charges based on the shared technical data. Let me just deal with another case, Ryan Cornelius in the UAE. Ryan Cornelius is yet again a British citizen who has been arbitrarily detained in Dubai for 18 years, despite well-documented evidence of an unfair trial and inhuman treatment. Ryan's detention has been found arbitrary by the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention. His case arises from a high-profile financial dispute involving loans connected to a major Dubai development project. Although he and his associates had reportedly